Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1449 of the War News stream. And tonight we have very big news from several different regions. First of all, we've seen that unknown objects had breached U.S. airspace near Texas last night, and we've got a lot of details about that situation. We're also hearing that NATO has begun a military operation near Russia, and also Russian forces are now collapsing on the front lines amid a new Ukrainian offensive now that Telegram and Starlink are now no longer available to the Russian forces. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have had significant developments within Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and also the Americas as well, over the course of just the past 24 hours. We have been able to hear of significant news that after the Russian Federation has largely shut down most, if not all, telecommunication apps within the Russian Federation, that the Russian army is currently suffering a near frontline collapse within the areas of the Kupyansk front and also the Zaporizhzhia front within the state of Ukraine. Currently, from what we understand, with all telecommunication apps being offline, the Russian Federation is having an incredibly difficult time communicating and coordinating its armed forces on the battlefield, which has led to an impromptu Ukrainian offensive being conducted on two fronts. Right now, from what we understand, especially within Zaporizhzhia, the Russian armed forces appear to be in active retreat, now cut off from communication with surrounding units. Whenever Ukrainian armed forces advanced into close proximity to a squad's flank, it now appears that they believe that they're possibly being encircled, and due to that reason, they now are conducting endless retreats. While these advances are not wildly large, as we would see in, say, 2022, these are quite significant and are showing us that the Russian front line was highly vulnerable to this communications collapse which has happened over just the past 24 hours. It also appears that the Russian army's soldiers are irate at this moment, with many demanding that Putin bring the systems back online, while others are now declaring Putin and his government to be a traitor to the Russian Federation and the Russian people, and are demanding that the army turns its guns away from the state of Ukraine Ukraine and against the Russian government. This appears to be well within time, as it also does appear that simultaneously, NATO is now conducting a joint exercise within the Arctic region, including northern Norway as well as Greenland and Iceland, with the Russian Federation openly making statements today that any such militarization of the island of Greenland may lead to direct military action by the Russian Federation and the very little bit of the armed forces that they have left. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians have also heavily hit and destroyed significant amounts of Russian power infrastructure over the course of the day, as well as some significant infrastructure within the area of Michirinsk, and we have also been able to hear outside of Ukraine and on in the Middle East that the Islamic Republic of Iran has once again torpedoed all ongoing talks with the United States of America once again, as Iranian officials have come out and stated that they will not, under any circumstances, negotiate their missile development programs at all at any negotiations. It also seems the United States is continuing to build up significant amounts of armed forces within the area, and it does seem that the Israelis are still heavily considering a preemptive strike against the Islamic Republic of Iran, with or without U.S. approval. Speaking of U.S. news, we have been able to hear that the El Paso airspace area was shut down last night by the Federal Aviation Administration for around 11 hours after an unidentified object appeared within the area of the airspace. Multiple reports have been stating different things, with some officials stating entirely different stories, but we have been able to hear that it's largely either a drone or a balloon that entered the airspace of the El Paso area last night, and apparently the Border Patrol used some form of a laser-based air defense system to be able to target and shoot down this unidentified aircraft of some sort. The Mexican Air Force has also been conducting military activities around the area of Sinaloa today, highly likely against the Sinaloa cartel, named after the region, and we have also been able to hear that within Washington, D.C., significant developments have been ongoing in multitudes of foreign policy, with the United States of America considering the possible withdrawal of the USMCA from standing U.S. trade agreements with Canada and Mexico, while at the same time, we've also been able to hear that the United States has apparently spoken with Netanyahu and has now announced that they are seriously considering making a deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran, much to the dismay of the Israelis, which state that the Iranians cannot be trusted, and I, for one, would generally agree with them. We've also heard that, however, while the U.S. has been making those statements, the U.S. is also stating that they are preparing the George H.W. Bush, currently conducting carrier preparedness drills off of the east coast of the United States, for its deployment into the area of the Eastern Mediterranean, most likely to join CENTCOM's area of responsibility and to prepare for military actions against the Islamic Republic of Iran. The People's Republic of China has also had an incredibly interesting development within it today, as we have been able to report that a Chinese citizen wandering around the Gobi Desert within the Western Theater Command has actually found what appears to be remnants or debris of a DF-31 intercontinental ballistic missile of the Chinese People's Liberation Army rocket forces. It seems as though, at the moment, that it appears that the People's Republic of China has been conducting some unannounced intercontinental ballistic missile tests within their very own territorial borders, with the debris landing inside of China, which was just was discovered by a Chinese citizen today and uploaded online, something that we have not been able to confirm as far as ICBM tests are concerned up until right now. We've also been able to hear some other major news out of Europe, but generally, we're going to save the rest of all the little pieces of news for the rest of the stream, and as you can tell, we do have a massive and significant amount of news to cover over just the past 24 hours alone. And of course, folks, we are going to be making sure to do this by channel tradition, starting with our largest stories first, and then moving our way on down into the smaller stories throughout the night. And that means that we are going to be moving first and foremost primarily into Ukraine, as we have been able to hear that the Russian Federation has apparently taken significant blunders and miscalculations over the past 48 hours, which have led to disastrous results on the front line inside of Ukraine. To bring some of you all up to speed, if you were not here yesterday, the Russian Federation announced and largely shut down the Telegram messaging app and also YouTube as well. YouTube is not really primarily used for communications purposes within the Russian Federation, but Telegram and WhatsApp are highly used programs within the Russian Federation that the Russian army has used for years inside of Ukraine to be able to communicate with each other. The Ukrainian armed forces similarly also use Telegram and WhatsApp, but the Ukrainians also heavily use Discord as well, from what we generally understand, according to our own personal experience with watching the Ukrainian armed forces at work. The Russians seem to only use Telegram and WhatsApp, and generally forgo using Discord whatsoever. But the Russian Federation heavily relies on the communications abilities that they get from Telegram and WhatsApp, because standard Russian communication systems that are integrated into the Russian army and standard issue are highly unreliable, and from what we can tell, are generally easily intercepted by Ukrainian armed forces. This has led to to the Russian army primarily, if not only, using these systems on WhatsApp and Telegram on their mobile phones to be able to communicate with each other at the platoon level, the company level, the battalion level, the regiment level, the brigade level, and even the group army level, from what we generally understand at the moment. And this means that any loss of those communication systems would quite literally destroy the entire communications chain, all the way from the squad level basically up to the group army level for every Russian unit that is inside of Ukraine. And with the closure of Telegram yesterday, the Russian army was already starting to go into a panic before things had gotten really bad, at least at the moment. Not only that, this is compounding onto the fact that the Starlink company has just ensured that all Starlink terminals within the Russian Federation's country and also the occupied territories of Ukraine were remotely shut off just about a week ago, meaning that not only are the Russians generally without any abilities to operate their wireless drones, which a large amount of the Russian drone forces use wireless drones, but they are now also not able to communicate with most of their units if they were using the Telegram messaging app. This meant that as of this morning, the Russian Federation was relying entirely on the WhatsApp messaging system to be able to communicate properly between different elements of the Russian armed forces. And as of this morning, the rug was pulled out under them as well, due to the Russian Federation now blocking WhatsApp messaging apps across the entirety of the Russian Federation from operating. This now means that both major communication systems used by the Russian army, which is WhatsApp and Telegram, have now effectively been banned inside the Russian Federation overnight. This now means that the Russian army on the front lines is dealing with an absolute communications blackout for the most part, unless they're using some form of a standard issue radio, which is highly uncommon at this point within the Russian army. Most Russian units are completely cut off from communications with their nearby platoons, their nearby companies, and even their nearby regiments, meaning that generally each squad is basically isolated and alone as far as they are concerned right now on the front lines. Russian soldiers have already been going absolutely livid at the moment over this situation, and we have been able to see that according to some statements that were made by Russian soldiers around the area of the front line, these were some of the statements that were made today. The Ukrainian armed forces have launched a local offensive. The situation near Kupyansk has not yet been clarified, but the enemy has been advancing north of Wheelopol and along the left bank of the Dnieper River. This in itself is not a catastrophe. Over the years of the war, the enemy has repeatedly launched attacks, lost men, and then retreated again. This time, the enemy's counteroffensive is being recorded against the backdrop of the Russian army's disconnection from Starlink. Black terminals and amateur craftsmen have become the key to reliable and often the only communication on the front. Telegram accounts purchased from soldiers' coffers and humanitarian donations have been turned into garbage. This has already pleased the enemy, but the enemy couldn't have imagined, even in their wildest dreams, that traitors within the Russian state would give them such an offensive measure, blocking Telegram. News is coming in from all over the front about soldiers searching for VPNs to maintain at least some form of communication, and tragic news is coming from the Belgrade region, as victims of shelled cities are unable to obtain information about the situation. The traitors destroyed a complex social infrastructure in an instant. We are the media, we depend on the means of disseminating information. We will not go into the cesspool called Messenger Max. Apparently, that's the only alternative left at this point that has not been banned in the Russian Federation, but we have been able to hear some murmuring that we haven't been able to confirm yet, that the Russian Federation might even ban this smaller app, Messenger Max, from operating in the country, as it appears that this larger communications blackout that's now being created by the Russian Federation's government is due to the belief that civil dissent may start to rapidly increase here within the next following months due to the absolutely despotic economic situation and strategic situation that has now developed for the Russian Federation. To try and meet this at
Well, you know what's interesting about this is that Messenger Max app that they keep talking about right here in the post. This is the weird part, folks, because we do know that Telegram is being throttled inside of Russia right now, and that's apparently being done by the Russian government. So they want to cut off Telegram because, generally speaking, Telegram is still a free use app, meaning you can get on there and largely be very little concerned with your security on there. It's usually pretty good. But Max is apparently the state-backed messenger app that Russia is trying to push. It's being framed as the patriotic alternative to WhatsApp and Telegram. So what the Russians are really trying to do here is they're trying to kick out the independent apps and replace it with basically their version of a state-sponsored app, so that way they can monitor the situation from the Russian government. It's basically the equivalent of what China has with WeChat. It's also a state-backed app that is used for citizens to chat on there. Basically, in my opinion, it seems like most likely for surveillance reasons. So that's what they're doing. So apparently the Russians don't even want to get on their state-backed app. They don't even want to get on there. They don't even trust their own app. They want to stay on Telegram, which is quite telling.
It certainly is telling, and it does appear that the Russian Federation is dealing with a fairly large incident right now on the front lines, because even to be able to try and download a replacement app, here's the current conundrum that the Russians are dealing with right now on the active front. If a Russian soldier or a Russian unit needs to get this new Messenger Max app to be able to communicate, that would simply require them to go onto an app store and download Messenger Max. The problem is that all of the Starlink terminals, which provided them with Wi-Fi and internet connection up until recently, were shut down a week ago, meaning that along the entirety of the active front line on the Russian side, there is no usable internet access. This means that Russian units will have to pick up, one at a time, and send their soldiers back far enough, which may be dozens of miles, into occupied territory into the Luhansk and Donetsk regions, to be able to try and sit down and then download the app. Then they'll have to set up the app, and then, once they do that, they will then travel back out into the wild of the front line, and then they'll completely lose control or access to the app because, once again, they're in an internet dead zone. So not only have they lost all of their communication abilities as of today, they've also lost their internet last week, meaning that they are basically up a creek without a paddle right now, and this also will be causing a significant amount of issues, especially within the short term, for the Russians' cohesiveness on the front line currently. We also saw another statement to add these two fronts together, because these are the two main linchpin areas that we're seeing today that are directly affected by this. Down in Zaporizhzhia, we got to see a Russian army soldier begging for Putin to turn the Starlinks, well, not really the Starlinks, but more so the telegrams and the Starlinks back on. Basically anything that could help the Russian army effectively communicate, he's begging that the Russians try and find a way to find an alternative or at least turn them back on. And here's the statement here. I would like to appeal to the RKN and those higher up. Perhaps Vladimir Volodymyrovich will hear this. The Telegram platform allows us to promptly exchange information and successfully combat enemy UAVs. The fact that you now want to take this tool away from us, well, he who sows the wind will reap the whirlwind. We are worthy sons of our nation. We're not against it. And we are always fighting for the enemy in any and all arenas, no matter how hard or easy it may be for us. But now, the very process of information exchange and interaction, which was established with immense difficulty, is being complicated. Believe me, I know this better than anyone because I was the one who set it all up. Well, now I'd like to ask the RKN a question. Did you even consult us about what you want to ban? Did a single one of you come here and find out how useful it is? Regards, Igni.
Dang, man, they must really hate that Messenger Max app. That must be something horrible. Like, it must not work very well because they are apparently so opposed to getting on that Russian state-backed app that they are going to go toe-to-toe with Vladimir Putin. This guy right here is essentially saying treasonous statements against Putin himself, basically accused him of turning against the soldiers. So they must hate that really bad.
Well, you know what's even crazier is that those Telegram posts from up in Kupyansk were calling Putin and his cronies traitors of the state. I mean, generally this is seeded what appears to be rebellious or even treasonous statements within the Russian army almost overnight, just due to the fact that they've basically wiped out all of their communication abilities with a single stroke. And it doesn't really look like it's panning out that well on the front lines for the Russians right now either, as we are now starting to hear the Ukrainian armed forces have almost immediately taken advantage, or it was quite coincidental that their offensives began in these two areas right when this was happening, because now Ukrainian forces appear to be advancing both in the area around Kamyansk and Stepnohersk within Zaporizhzhia, and also within the area of Kupyansk to its northeastern area near Petropavlivka against the Russian armed forces. We saw the actual report coming out from the southern front in Zaporizhzhia that Russian troops appear to be retreating, and this was from none other than the Moscow Times, which is a Russian newspaper that is generally sponsored and operated by the Russian Federation's government with their blessing. And according to them, they have stated that Russian troops began retreating in the Zaporizhzhia region after the Starlink outage. To generally explain the tactical situation as to why this sort of a thing is happening, it actually has nothing to do with the Russian army now being greatly weakened and easily beaten by the Ukrainian army, at least in terms of their fighting strength, because of this. The issue with what has happened right now is that an army heavily relies on intelligence and communication to be able to effectively operate in a frontline area. If we're taking the specific area that we're talking about right now, which exists between Mali Shibaki and Kupyansk, which is about a 5-mile wide front, this area is generally patrolled and manned by several companies, possibly even a battalion tactical group or two of Russian soldiers, which is about 800 to 1,600 men roughly. If we were to take that number right now and then break that down in its basic elements, those battalion tactical groups are made up of about 8 companies each company being about 800 men. Those companies are then broken down into platoons, with each company having roughly about 4 platoons, which are made up of about 25 men each. And then those are further broken on down into squads, which have about roughly 7 to 8 men in them each. Now, those squad leaders have to be able to communicate with all other 7 people inside of their squad, meaning that all of those guys have to have Telegram, and they all have to be able to communicate. Those squad leaders also have to communicate with their platoon command. So right now, just within one squad leader, we have 7 links of communication between that squad leader and his squad mates. And then we go up to the platoon level. Now we multiply that number of people who have to communicate by a factor of 3. So now we're talking about roughly 24 or so people, 25 really, having to all have Telegram apps to communicate at a platoon level. This is one of the very smallest and most basic tactical elements that you would see on the battlefield. Then you move up from the platoon level to the company level. So now you multiply that by 100. 100 people have to have Telegram apps to be able to communicate with each other, up their chain of command to their squad leader, so that way their squad leader can command to more so communicate to their platoon leader, and then their platoon leaders all to get together and talk to their company commander. Then multiply that by a factor of 8. And then all 800 of those people, the company commanders, the platoon commanders, and all the squad commanders, and all of the squad members, all have to communicate with each other over Telegram to their battalion commander to be able to get their general broader orders of what a front line would look like and how it would generally operate. And then those commands have to go all the way back down the chain, all of that being done through Telegram. So you can kind of get the idea of how bad this is that Telegram has effectively collapsed. All 1,600 of these guys are basically in the dark. Unless you're within shouting distance of someone right now on the front line in this area, you cannot effectively communicate with them. This means that squads now are at a severe disadvantage against the Ukrainians in this area of the front line and generally across the whole of the front. While Ukrainians are able to communicate with each other immediately over any distance and span of time on the front line currently, the Russian army is now having to take the action, at least at the moment, of sending out couriers and messengers on foot or on motorcycles to be able to get to the next leader up. So the squad leaders have to send out a runner to go find the platoon commander, and then the platoon commander has to send out his own runner to then go to the company commander, and then to the battalion tactical group commander, and then all the way back down the chain again, meaning that the communication links are incredibly long, incredibly susceptible to being destroyed, as FPV drones could just wipe out the runners. And not only that, it's much slower than the Ukrainians, meaning that when the Ukrainians are now conducting their offensive right now, if a Russian squad looks to like it's getting overwhelmed, there might be a squad close nearby that they really can't communicate with that could actually help them not get overwhelmed and possibly counterattack and push the Ukrainians away from their position. But they don't know that, and they can't communicate with that other squad to do that, meaning that that Russian squad, in its mind, it feels like it's being encircled, and therefore, by default, a normal squad leader or commander would give the order to retreat and fall back. Currently, because of that, the Ukrainians are gaining a pretty decent amount of ground, because basically no Russian units in Kupyansk or in the Zaporizhzhia region between Kupyansk and Mali Shibaki can communicate with each other at all. And a lot of people are wondering what this is going to turn into, because right now it looks wildly promising. It looks as though the Ukrainians might be able to conduct what would be considered in 2026's terms a battlefield sweep. And when I say that, it's not going to be anything significant. The Ukrainians will probably be able to liberate maybe a dozen villages in Kupyansk and Zaporizhzhia combined, which doesn't sound like a lot, but with how slow these front lines move these days, that is actually considered, at least relative to this phase of the war, a pretty significant victory. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that right now, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so we do see that the Russian forces are absolutely panicking as there has been Telegram, Starlink, and also WhatsApp outages. The Starlink was turned off, as far as we can tell, by U.S. Officials. I guess you could say more like corporate officials turned it off. Telegram and WhatsApp have been throttled by the Russian government. That's in an effort to cause censorship, based on what we know. So now it's preventing a defense against Ukrainian offensives because Ukraine just launched a brand new offensive in Zaporizhzhia, and the Russians are not ready to switch over to the new Max Messenger app, which is apparently the state-backed version of a talking app, basically a text communication app. So what is going to happen now? 59% said Ukraine will succeed in their offensive as a result, while 22% said Ukraine will maintain a stalemate at least, and 10% said Russia will likely regain momentum. And I think that this right here is going to be a very big issue because I would personally predict that Russia will successfully transfer over to the Max Messenger app. But the problem is, though, even if they do, they don't have an internet connection, which they have to have in order to communicate using these apps. So the only way to get around that is to have a domestically produced Starlink system inside of Russia, which to my knowledge they don't have, or they can start laying internet lines to the front lines, which is going to take ages and also be sort of impractical. So there's really no immediate fix to this. There's really no immediate solution. And I would say that they're probably throttling Telegram and also WhatsApp, not because they're worried about, information leaking to Western sources, because that's been a problem since the very beginning of the war. They're probably more concerned with the soldiers and also citizens using those apps to form civil disobedience against the Russian government. Because we recently heard reports that the Kremlin is getting very paranoid about an uprising, a civil uprising that is, inside of the country. So they're getting so scared, they're going to basically screw the soldiers over in the meantime while they're trying to fight a Ukrainian offensive. So I'm with the 59%. I think Ukraine will succeed as a result of this, and the Russians are in foul shape at this point between those multiple different issues. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I would be with the 60%. I think that Ukraine is certainly going to be succeeding on the battlefield within the next few weeks, most likely as a result of this major mistake by the Russians, especially if they don't reverse the action, because it appears that right now the Ukrainian armed forces are able to take advantage of Russia's confused and disoriented state due to the lack of communication on the front to be able to push them back. And if that doesn't change anytime soon, the Ukrainians will have the upper hand and the advantage and will be able to gain some significant victories, at least in this phase of the war. And when I say this phase, folks, at the beginning of the war, the advances that the Ukrainians would be doing right now would be considered next to nil. But at this point in the war, considering that basically no one's ever able to gain any ground, even taking tens of thousands of men lost, this is actually considered to be a significant victory at this phase of the war, at least currently. So I think that the Ukrainians will be able to gain some significant ground in this phase of the war because of this. And I also see a lot of people talking about, well, don't the Russians have redundant communication systems, or don't they have radios? What happened to those? And I actually got to bring y'all into a very interesting rabbit hole about the Russian army that we can generally trace all the way back to 2008 during the Georgian War, which happened over the winter of 2008 to 2009. Back when the Georgian War started in 2008 to 2009, which was generally the official beginning of the end of any hopes that Russia would ever be a friendly nation to the West, it was generally seen that the Russian army had a lot of issues even back then. The Georgian War generally was a sweep for the Russians. It looked as though they basically won outright, and they generally did, because the Georgians basically had no foreign support whatsoever. However, there were a lot of critical problems that the Russian army saw that appeared inside the Georgian War, and even foreign analysts were easily able to identify while the Russian army was advancing inside of the nation of Georgia. One of them that was the most shocking was that Russia's radios are quite unreliable to the extreme degree that they basically don't work, or they give them radios that have very little encryption and can easily be broken through and intercepted. This means that a lot of Russian commanders would either not trust their radios if they were working, and if they weren't working, they just wouldn't have a radio to work with. So many Russian commanders in the Georgian War, I'm not kidding about this, like y'all would think that this is insane, but this is the truth, they would go up to the side of the roads to pay phones, and they would either pull out their credit card or they pop a couple of coins lines in, and then whip out the phone, and then literally call up the headquarters in Rostov-on-Don within the Southern Theater Command, and then go and talk to them over a landline on what to do next. And that was generally the only way that Russian units were able to communicate in Georgia. It was such a major issue that after that war, the Russian army greatly studied their issues with communications and also logistics, which was another major failing of theirs in the Georgian War, and they came up with a new and improved form of soldier equipment that was called the Ratnik system. The Ratnik system was come about in 2016 during the general military reforms in the Russian army, and they stated that it should fix most, for one, of the tactical problems with Russian equipment being dated and also the communication issues. What ended up happening is that they ended up issuing everyone Baofeng radios, which are generally used by amateurs, at least in most areas of the world, and of course, once again, are easily intercepted. Once the war in Ukraine started in 2022, Russian radio calls on the Baofeng radios were easily intercepted by the Ukrainians and would almost, if not always, give away their positions to the Ukrainian armed forces. Not only that, Baofengs generally are also somewhat unreliable in frontline conditions where they could be beat up or banged up a lot because of the sort of strenuous activity that they'll be subjected to along with the soldiers that are carrying them. For that reason,
I think the main problem with those is, to my knowledge, I'm not an expert on those radios, but I don't even believe they're encrypted. I think they're just like regular radios, aren't they?
Yeah, they are regular radios, and that was the huge problem, is that they were easily broken through, and the messages or calls were intercepted between everyone that was on the front of the Russian army, and the Ukrainians would use that information to, one, know exactly what the Russians were going to do next, which gave them a huge edge in the early part of the war, but also to be able to attack wherever those radio calls came from, which also would end up taking out a good bit of Russian soldiers that were simply just trying to effectively communicate. So then all the Baofengs went out the window by about the earlier part of 2023, and since then they have pretty much entrenched themselves in WhatsApp and Telegram. Those are basically the two main telecommunication systems that exist for the Russian army, and radios have been completely abandoned. So if they wanted to go back to using radios, they're going to have to most likely use the Russian standard equipped radios, which are very similar, or they are, to Baofeng radios.
That's pretty tough right there. That means they basically have no options left at this point, because I can see where the Russian government would be concerned, because the Russian government can't surveil Telegram, nor can it surveil these other platforms like WhatsApp. The encryption on those platforms prevents Russia from breaking into them. There are ways, I'm sure, that hackers can get in there, but it makes it very, very difficult compared to Russia having their own homemade messaging software, which has probably backdoors built into it. It makes it a lot easier if they use their own homemade platform. So that's got to be why they're trying to do this. They are getting so concerned that the people are going to somehow coordinate on these Telegram apps that they got to ban it or try to somehow cut it off because they're so worried about it.
Yeah, I would have to say it's definitely not looking good for them at all. I mean, a single bit, to be entirely honest. And also, quickly to show someone, because I saw someone say, Radnik's only a camo pattern. Actually, that's what a lot of people think, but it, interestingly enough, is the name of the entire new uniform system that they came up with in 2016, and not just the camouflage itself. You can actually see some of the accessories right here, including this GLONASS, which generally was usually replaced with the Baofeng radio, for basically everything. Like, a lot of Russian soldiers never got equipped with a GLONASS, which is technically supposed to be a GPS and kind of a bit of an all-in-one system. Most of them would never be given this. They would be given a Baofeng instead, because when the war in Ukraine began, and well, the invasion of Ukraine began in early 2022, we never saw any Russian soldiers carrying around the Sagittarius, which is this larger tablet sort of a system right here, or the GLONASS, or any other form of a con system. They basically only carried around Baofengs. So it was pretty rough for them at the beginning of the war, and that's why they basically become, I guess you could say, heavily dependent on Telegram and WhatsApp. And now without it, they're in crisis mode, because they either have to go back to the Baofengs, which will easily be intercepted, give away a lot of positions, and also give away a lot of tactical plans on the front, or they're going to go with no communications whatsoever, which puts them at a wildly severe disadvantage to the Ukrainians, and basically gives the Ukrainians on the tactical level the upper hand in every single firefight, because their coordination, communication, and ability to respond quickly against Ukrainian attacks will basically not exist. And also,
And also, you got to remember. Also, you got to remember as well that with a radio, you can only transmit audio. That's all you can do on a radio, obviously. But on Telegram and WhatsApp, you could send visual pictures and things like that, and videos as well. So it allowed them to share battle plans over that platform as well. They were probably doing that, which is going to be a big problem because now all they can do now is simply tell each other on the radio, "Hey, look, we're going to go over there," and that's highly insecure. Like you're basically broadcasting your entire offensive plan, your defensive strategy over an unencrypted radio, which is the worst possible thing you could possibly do. So they've got to switch over to the Russian version of the app. But even if they wanted to, like I mentioned before, and like we've both been saying, even if they wanted to switch over, they don't have an internet connection. So really, the frontline guys at this point are screwed. Like it was a very opportune time for Ukraine to launch an offensive in multiple different areas in Zaporizhzhia. They're likely to have success as a result of that because they simply can't communicate.
I would have to agree. They're definitely going to be having some major successes as a result of this. And I got to be honest with y'all, folks. I never thought that the Russian government would basically be its own undoing on the front lines in a very major tenet of modern warfare, or really warfare historically at all, which is communication. But it appears that they're now absolutely knocking the kneecaps out with a sledgehammer on the communication side of things for the Russian armed forces, which will end up catastrophically. And this also, by the way, folks, I forgot to mention, one of the other big things that they learned about in the Georgian War was their complete lack of logistics, which I'm sure many of y'all have realized has been a major failing of the Russian army over the entire 4 years that the war in Ukraine has been going on. That was the two big things that they analyzed. Hell, at this point, it was... let's see, that would have been nearly 20 years ago at this point. Actually, more like 18 years ago, for being exact. That was 18 years ago that they learned the lesson that, one, they suck at communications, and two, they suck at logistics. And then 18 years later, they still have not fixed those critical failings of the Russian army, which kind of shows you how corrupt they are, because the U.S. Army would have been on top of that like white on rice, and they would have fixed that probably within about a year or two. The Russian army has had 18 years to try and fix it, and they still have not fixed either one of those two major problems. But moving on out of Ukraine for a moment, though, and generally the rest of the Russian Federation, we do have to move on over across the seas to get to another big piece of news that's happened recently today. You're near to the U.S.-Mexican border. Actually, this kind of happened a little bit last night and over the course of today. It kind of straddled the waypoint within our 24-hour news coverage periods, but we did hear of a major development that happened around the area of El Paso in Texas. Some of y'all may actually know a little bit about El Paso, Texas. One, it's a very famous name because it sounds very Mexican, to be entirely honest with y'all, and it actually is Mexican. The town was founded by the Spanish colonials under the colony of New Spain, and then it was taken by the United States later during the Mexican-American War after the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, allowing for the United States to seize the remainder of Texas that was not controlled by the Republic of Texas, and then at that point the state of Texas, as well as New Mexico, a large part of Arizona, except for the small area down here which would be purchased in the Gadsden Purchase, Colorado, Utah, Nevada, and California, which were all parts at that time of the Mexican Empire, which was defeated by the United States in the Mexican-American War. However, outside of that, there's also a very famous song from the Wild West days about the city of El Paso, and I'm sure that a lot of y'all might know that, or might not. It's a really interesting song. Outside of that, however, this area was able to make it into our news coverage today because a very interesting incident has occurred within the airspace surrounding El Paso. According to information that was issued last night by the Federal Aviation Administration, a NOTAM, which is a notice to airmen, was issued closing the city of El Paso's airspace down for a period of 10 calendar days, effective immediately. This was a fairly large sort of an incident that happened within this area, and we generally have not seen the municipal area of an airspace within the United States of America completely shut down over 10 calendar days, generally ever since the incident at 9/11, where the Twin Towers and the Pentagon were attacked by civilian aircraft that had been hijacked by terrorist forces. This was an incredibly interesting incident when it happened, and we have heard basically about every story as far as two go that you could imagine at this point that has happened within this area. And right now, U.S. officials seem to be a little bit up in the air about what kind of story they're telling the public. But we do have two separate stories at the moment right now, and we'll be sharing with y'all what we have, at least at the moment. The first story that came out was that supposedly there were cartel drones that had apparently crossed the border, according to some U.S. officials. And to read y'all off here, right, according to Cigar Injetti, he said the El Paso NOTAM was also encompassed a very specific area of New Mexico, which is very near to NASA's White Sands test facility. This official story is now that counter-drone operations involving some brand new laser shoot-down technology was used. This is something that is somewhat interesting, as it was believed, at least initially, that there might be some form of cartel drones that had crossed the border near to the area of El Paso, which may have threatened civilian aviation at lower altitudes within this area, which is what led to the airspace being shut down. The El Paso International Airport is only several miles away from the US-Mexican border, and therefore cartel drones that may fly at low altitudes into the area of the air traffic controls region control zone around the El Paso International Airport may have led to some sort of a warning being issued, and then the Federal Aviation Administration then shutting down the surrounding airspace, including the airports and also the cities. We then have heard later on that there's now other stories and developments that are coming out at the moment, as another story has now emerged that the Border Patrol, having been loaned a laser weapon system from the Department of Defense, was used to shoot down a party balloon, contributing to the shutdown of El Paso's airspace. That was according to Fox News. We also have another story that apparently, according to other sources that are familiar with the matter, they stated that a person familiar with the matter said the FAA shutdown was a result of a disagreement over the Pentagon's desire to use or test counter-drone capabilities, including high-powered lasers, and the FAA's move caught the administration as a whole by surprise. So this version of the story, just to get out the three of them here and explain them, one of them is that it was a cartel drone and the Border Patrol shot it down with a laser. The other one is that the Border Patrol shot down a party balloon or something along those lines, and the laser had been loaned to them by the Department of Defense. And the third story is that the Department of Defense, which was in control and operation of the short-range laser air defense system, apparently targeted and shot down some sort of a test balloon, from what we would understand, near to the testing range. And due to the FAA being concerned about the safety of the traveling public, they then pretty much had a knee-jerk reaction and shut down the El Paso airspace for 10 calendar days. But once it was realized that the test didn't last for a long period of time, they then rescinded the shutdown of the airspace only about 11 hours later. Right now, we have quite literally no clue which one of these three stories is correct, because we have generally every single story that you could imagine. There's generally some sort of an underlining reality to this, that there was some sort of U.S. federal action with what seems to be a laser-based air defense system within the area, but what exactly they were shooting at, we don't know. There's either a cartel drone, a party balloon, which would kind of be odd that would be picked up on radar, or it is a targeting balloon that was sent up by the Army or the Border Patrol or whoever, and then they targeted that and shot it down. We don't really know which one of the three it is, but it does appear that a lot of people right now are talking about what they think it might be. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so the enforcer is right. This is a very historic event because for the first time since 9/11, a major U.S. airport was completely shut down last night, which was the El Paso International Airport. That is the first time that's happened since obviously 2001. So a very big event that's happened here last night. And we did see that since they closed the entire airspace around El Paso, Texas, the official reason on the NOTAM was national security. So why did this happen? Because right now there's so many different versions of the story. Nobody's really sure which one is the real story. And I want to emphasize, there's not been an official statement made even today by the U.S. government about what this was. It's been anonymous sources speaking to the press, and that's all we know. That's the only official narrative we've gotten is from anonymous sources. So 46% said it was likely a cartel drone or a balloon, while 22% said the USA was testing laser tech, and 17% said it sounds like a terror threat that the U.S. was trying to deal with. So here's the one thing I find very interesting. There was apparently very little coordination whatsoever between the FAA, the Border Patrol, and also all the other federal authorities that are in charge of guarding the airspace. I think it's very clear from all the confusion that the right hand did not know what the left hand was doing in this scenario. So that implies, in my opinion, that this was a very urgent situation. It seems to have been an emergency situation, and they had to act so quickly that they didn't have time to talk to the other federal agencies, which indicates to me that they were caught off guard by something. So I'm with the 17%. It sounds to me like there was some type of terror threat that they got intelligence about, and they preemptively shut down the airspace to deal with it. We were initially heard from anonymous sources that a cartel drone or multiple drones had crossed the border into America, gone into our airspace, and they were shot down with laser weaponry. Now, that's what we first heard as well. And, you know, Fort Bliss is right there, by the way. It's an Army base right outside the airport that does apparently have that technology on the base. So it sounds plausible to me, and I'm with the 17%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I'm actually I gotta say, I'm not really sure where I'd be in this because we do have a video here that apparently, according to some, was filmed right before the airspace was shut down around the El Paso area. And I want to quickly try and show y'all this to all of y'all right here because this is the only thing that we have that's close to being video evidence. I can't actually play the video, but I can show y'all some of the frames within the video, and it's particularly this one about right here.
Like a dot here.
Really quickly, I'm trying to see if I can get it to the part where it shows it the best. It's this blob right here. That's generally what appears to have been over the El Paso area right before the NOTAM was issued. We can't really tell how far away that is or what its altitude is, but it does appear, at least in the clip when I watched it, to generally be stationary at the time the video was made. This would lead me to believe that it may have highly likely been some sort of a larger balloon, and if I was to try and take a heavy extrapolation at this, I think it might be a blend of the two stories, that it was cartel drones and also a balloon. And I'm going to have to give you all the idea that I think that it might have been some form of a smuggling balloon that was launched by the cartel across the border, and it started to lose gas somewhere across the border and therefore started to descend over the area of El Paso. And considering that it appears to be a larger balloon, like a weather balloon, they may have freaked out, shut down the airspace, and then popped the balloon with a laser-based defense system. That would seem to line up because the thing about this, really quickly to show y'all, is that these are where the locations of the NOTAMs were issued. And interestingly enough, it doesn't appear that there is any military facility around the Mount Riley Wilderness area where there was a large trapezoid-shaped NOTAM that was provided in this area. And it also appears that the area around the El Paso International Airport also had a NOTAM issued around it as well. One thing that's interesting to note here, however, is that the White Sands testing range, which we generally believe the laser-based air defense system is based out of, did not have a NOTAM issued over it. And if we were to assume that this was some form of a weapons test that was conducted by the U.S. Armed Forces or the U.S. Border Patrol within a defined weapons testing range, we would assume that the NOTAM would actually be over that testing range instead of the municipal area of the International Airport and also Mount Riley Wilderness area.
Yeah, the whole theory. I've heard that theory been told by several people on Twitter and other platforms. Some people are alleging that this was some type of coordinated test to test out a new laser-based weapon that the military has. That theory has very little credibility because why would the U.S. military test a weapon in the vicinity of an international airport with active flights taking off and landing from it in such a populated area? If they wanted to test that weapon, they could do it out in the desert, out in Nevada. They could do it anywhere. Why would they do it in the middle of a populated area with tons of people at risk by firing that laser weapon? That is extremely unlikely. Also, by the way, the fact that no other federal agency was informed about this, not even the local municipality in El Paso was notified that the airspace was closed. They were caught off guard. Literally everybody was caught off guard by it. So that seems like a very, very odd story that this would be a training exercise by any means. It does not seem like that. It seemed very urgent and very emergent based on how quick it happened. Also, another thing that people don't really fully understand either is that there's all kinds of smuggling drones and balloons that cross over the Mexican-U.S. border constantly. That is not something that's unusual. It happens quite a bit. And we have never seen airspace get shut down by the FAA over a balloon incursion into the United States. And the cartels do that all the time. That's one of the main ways that they get stuff across the border that's contraband. So, this seems like something very much out of the ordinary. I think it's something much bigger than we're being told. And the fact the U.S. government has not made an official statement about it is concerning. Also, it's a little bit irritating because people's lives could have been at risk here, and we haven't gotten an official statement about exactly what occurred, even to this date, about what happened last night.
I would have to say, folks, that I would generally believe it probably is some form of a cartel smuggling balloon that entered the area, and we're just not getting any statements on it at the moment because the large blob that was filmed over El Paso right before the NOTAM was issued would appear to be highly indicative of the kind of smuggling balloons that we see, say, in Estonia that are launched out of Belarus, but at a much larger scale, possibly suggesting that it might have been some sort of a cartel smuggling balloon and that it lost altitude right around the area of the El Paso region, especially over the international airport, which would pretty much, to me, it would reasonably be assumed at that point that the El Paso airspace around the international airport would be shut down to deal with that issue. But the one thing that I can't really explain, however, is why the Mount Riley Wilderness area also had a NOTAM issued simultaneously within that area as well. I have a feeling the explanation's fairly... Go ahead.
But why would they shut down the airspace and stuff? Because this happens all the time. Like I was just saying, this happens constantly. Like the cartel's always sending stuff across the border. Like when it comes to drones, they use Mavics. I mean, they use anything they have at their disposal to send stuff across the border. So why would this be different all of a sudden? We're shutting down airspace for the first time since 9/11 over a major airport, over a routine balloon crossing over.
Oh, well, because it could be traveling in an approach lane, and you generally don't want, a regional aircraft, sucking a giant balloon and some drugs into its intake on approach. Like, I think that might be the reason why, because the video showed that whatever this thing was, it was generally over downtown El Paso, which would be very close to an approach lane that aircraft would be using. And if there is any belief that there is not 1,000 feet of separation between that object, as a matter of fact, even with this one, considering that it's an uncontrolled craft of some sort, and the air traffic control doesn't have any ability to vector it or tell it where to go because there's no operator on it, it poses a threat to all aviation, no matter what vertical clearance you have. So for that reason, they would probably take a precautionary action and shut down the airspace to then try and deal with the issue, or let it float on through. And then once it's floated on through, or they shoot it down, then they reopen the airspace and then allow normal commercial traffic to resume.
It just seems to me like if it was something like that, then I mean, why wouldn't the government just simply come out and say that and say, oh, there was a cartel balloon that somehow lost altitude, it threatened the airspace of the international airport, so therefore we shot it down out of abundance of caution. The fact, and this is why it's very stupid for the government to go silent and not make a public statement about this, is because it invites conspiracies, it invites a bunch of speculation that may be the wrong conclusion, because the government will not make an official statement on the record about what occurred last night. So that's why it's better to be transparent, because there would be no reason whatsoever to hide the fact that they shot down a cartel balloon. Like that's not something that they would need to keep secret, which is why I think it could be something a little bit more serious. It could be maybe possibly a terrorist threat that they received and possibly reacted very strongly to it out of an abundance of precaution. That might be why they're not saying it. It could be the threat still on the loose.
I would doubt it, because actually looking at this NOTAM here, this NOTAM only extended up to 17,999 feet. And if this was some sort of a major threat to the El Paso area, we would probably see that the NOTAM would be extended to an indefinite limit in terms of altitude over the area, and no flights would even be allowed to fly over El Paso. This appears to have been directly affecting the area that would be under the control of the air traffic controllers for, say, final approaches and also takeoffs, because this area appears to be medium altitude and lower that the NOTAM was issued for around the El Paso International Airport, meaning that whatever the threat was, it was apparently within the approach lane of one of the runways at El Paso International Airport, and also the Army airfield that I believe is just north of that airport, which would be the Biggs Army airfield seen right here. And so for that reason, it appears that they shut down the approach lanes and takeoff lanes from the runways at El Paso. I think that's what it is. I still don't know what the Fort Riley Wilderness area was about, and that NOTAM, I don't know what that was for, but I think the thing might have just floated on through, because considering that it seems to have taken hours, and we do have a little clip showing the blob over El Paso, I think that it might have just been a balloon, and they certainly wouldn't shoot that down over a civilian area because it could fall on someone or fall on a house and end up harming or killing someone. So they might have just let it float on out of the area, and once they generally confirmed that it had floated out of the area and it was no longer a threat to incoming and outgoing air traffic, they then reopened the El Paso International Airspace.
I just find that still unlikely, because like you're saying, though, that second polygon, it's off to the left over there. If your explanation is correct, then there would only be a reason to do a NOTAM over the international airport, and that would be it. So what's up with that second one over there? I mean, that makes no sense at all why there's a second one. This whole thing just kind of reeks. I see some people getting really conspiratorial with it. Like some people are saying like, oh, it was like some like UFO. It's nothing, like that. It's something way more concrete than we know about. But the fact the government won't make a statement about it is certainly not good. And also, by the way, it's like if y'all haven't seen the statements coming out of the area, the El Paso government was pissed off. Like they were extremely angry that they were not notified about the situation. They were left completely in the dark, according to the statements, about what was happening. So the NOTAM prevented even medevac flights from taking off. Like that was also wild in itself. Medevac flights couldn't take off. No police flights could take off. Nothing could take off. It was all grounded in that entire radius you're looking at in El Paso.
Yeah, it is interesting, but I guess we'll just have to keep it a mystery for now until we eventually get some information on what exactly it was. But also just to make sure to place our bets right now, I'm saying, folks, that it was probably some sort of a cartel smuggling balloon that posed a threat to incoming and outgoing traffic at the airport, and that was what led to the NOTAMs being issued. That would be my bet at the moment right now. So, Matthew, just in case we get any further follow-ups on this later, so that way we can see which one of us was closer to being dead on the head with this one. What do you think it was again?
Me personally, this is my speculation, just based on what I've heard so far. It sounds to me like the federal government may have intercepted maybe a credible threat against the area. Perhaps someone had a weapon across the border inside of Mexico, and out of an abundance of caution, they grounded the flights at El Paso Airport and also issued these NOTAMs just to ensure that whatever the threat was couldn't endanger people on aircraft. That's my guess currently, but once again, it's just speculation. I can't prove it, obviously, because we haven't gotten official statements yet, but that's my guess.
And so, now that we have both of our guesses in, Matthew believes it might have been a man pad on the other side of the Mexican border that the cartel might have had that threatened civil aviation. I'm saying it was probably a smuggling balloon, a fairly large one that was in an approach lane that led to the shutdown. We will see which one of us ends up being correct here in a couple of days when the statement might come out. It might never come out, because one thing that we've learned about this administration is that it's the least transparent administration that has ever existed in the modern age that we've at least had to cover on news. So we might never hear anything about this, and if anyone tries to ask the FAA regulators as to why they did this, they might tell them, "You're fake news, kiss our ass," and then we'll never know because they will never tell anyone. So we'll have to wait and see. But anyways, moving on out of that, we have also been able to see, however, that down in Sinaloa, in Mexico, it appears that the Mexican military was conducting some form of air activity against the cartel, we're assuming. This was near to the area of Jesus Maria in the region of Sinaloa, and I cannot show you all the full clip because it does appear to be copyrighted, sadly. But I can show you all at least some of the helicopters and some of the action that was conducted. As y'all could see, that it appears to be Blackhawks or Mi-17s or a combination of the two that were being dropped off near to the area of this village, possibly with federal Marines of the Mexican Marines being dropped off, as it appears that the Marines of the Mexican Armed Forces are generally the ones that are used for operations against the cartels, at least from what we've seen in prior strategies and stratagems that have been deployed by the Mexican government to try and deal with cartel activity. That's really all we have on that situation. We weren't able to get a lot of extra detail from the ground, and we also haven't gotten an official press release from the government of Mexico to explain even further what is going on right now. But we were able to hear something else that is fairly interesting today, and one that I gotta say, folks, I don't know about, and so I'll get y'all into it. According to the President of the United States, he intends to carry out strikes against narco-terrorists on land. This is the direct quote. "By striking the vessels, we cut down drug smuggling. Now we'll begin operations on the ground. We had to deal with the ships first because if we had launched ground strikes, cartel members would have immediately moved into vessels. Now there are none left. Now we will start striking on land." So this apparently is insinuating that the U.S. will soon start airstrike campaigns inside of countries like Mexico, Central American states, and Northern South American countries in attempts to be able to try and wipe out cartel groups. This brings up a large issue of national sovereignty, as the U.S. technically, by conducting an airstrike on any country without their permission, whether it be on cartel forces or not, is technically violating a nation's sovereignty, and that could be insinuated or generally understood to be an act of war by whatever country is getting bombed by the United States out of the blue. Generally inside the Middle East, this has kind of set a precedent that the U.S. can generally kind of do whatever it wants in that regard because of the war on terror and generally striking terrorist forces within that region. But we generally have never done anything like this, at least within the last century, here within the Americas. The last time we've done anything like this, folks, to actually tell you all about the last time we did something like this, was during the time of the Mexican Revolution and the rise of Pancho Villa and his gang of thieves and thugs that existed around the U.S.-Mexican border. During that time, the U.S. Army was actually deployed to the U.S.-Mexican border and actually engaged, fought, and largely started to cause significant losses for Pancho Villa and his gang of bandits within the area of Sonora and Chihuahua. Actually, some of our more famous commanders from the Second World War, like Eisenhower and Patton, as well as Bradley, were actually in the U.S. Army as officers, junior officers during that time, and were actually involved in some of those operations near to the border region. However, at that time, Mexico actually did not have a legitimate government, or at least one that was heavily centralized and operating within Mexico. It was actually in the midst of what was basically a second civil war within Mexico. So for that reason, because of the sovereignty crisis that created in Mexico, that allowed us to to have the general sort of a vacuum to where we could conduct limited operations inside of the Mexican border regions to be able to try and deal with Pancho Villa. But we very rarely, the U.S. Army historically then, very rarely ever went deep into Mexico. And when I say they would conduct limited border actions into Mexico, I mean at the furthest south, they'd probably go to some place like Magdalena de Quino or Villa Ahumada, somewhere around there, but they wouldn't really go much farther down than that, because generally they were just trying to protect the border region. They weren't trying to wipe out Pancho Villa and every single bandit in Mexico over the course of the Mexican Revolution. So with that in mind, a lot of people are wondering, what in the world is the U.S. going to be doing? Are they going to be striking Mexico incredibly soon, or are they not? Is this just hype talk? Is this talk to try and distract from something else, which appears to have gotten a lot of Congress members really angry today, that it appears that a lot of stuff might have been misrepresented about a certain thing that was supposed to be released and then it really wasn't, and then a whole bunch of stuff was censored that wasn't supposed to be? Or is it something legitimate? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
So this is not the first time we've heard this, by the way. We've heard this, in fact, over several months in different wordage, but it sounds like the U.S. is declaring it plans to start striking cartels on land. So the question is the U.S. about to strike Mexico, since a lot of cartels operate, obviously, on Mexican soil? 40% said yes, the U.S. will strike Mexico soon, while 34% said no, the U.S. will not strike Mexico, and 18% said I'm 50-50 on this question. And I'm still having some doubts about the U.S. striking Mexico. Some people got so rattled last night by the situation in El Paso that they thought maybe it was the Marines or something going into Mexico and crossing the border. But obviously that was not the case, and people got a little bit overly rattled about it. So I just don't think the U.S. would actually strike Mexico, especially against Mexican wishes, because the problem with it is, like we've mentioned before, they are our #1 trading partner with the United States. So that would be economically very unwise for the U.S. to really shake that up like that, because it would hurt us in our economy, which is already kind of in foul shape for the average citizen, quite a bit extra. In fact, it would shake things up so bad it could finish the United States off, perhaps. So for that reason alone, I would still say the U.S. probably will not strike Mexico. It's likely just more empty statements, hopefully, because that would not be wise to do this. So I'm with the 33%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be generally with the 33%, just due to the fact that if this was what the U.S. administration is actually planning on doing, this would be an absolute disaster. Mexico is nationally our largest trading partner anywhere in the world. Funnily enough, just in 2024, Mexico totaled, in total trade in exports and imports between the two countries, a $935 billion, it's nearly $1 trillion trade economy. That is larger than most states' GDPs within the United States of America in the collective trade that we have with Mexico and us. Funnily enough, Mexico is actually the second largest country that we export to as well, meaning that Mexican business is not only good for American manufacturers, but Mexican business is also good for American importers. It's basically good every way around. And even according to the direct excerpt from the Office of the United States Trade Representative, which is an official U.S. government website, Mexico has consistently been one of the top 2 trading partners for the United States. Currently, as of last year, they were #1. The two countries share a long history of supply chain integration, including especially in the automotive, electronics, medical devices, and textile industries. Most recently, in 2024, Mexico was the second largest destination for U.S. exports and the top source of U.S. imports. In 2024, over 80% of total Mexican goods exports to the United States and over 40% of total Mexican goods imports were from the United States. The United States and Mexico have the largest and most important trade relationship, at least that our country is concerned for, in the entirety of the world. Funnily enough, the collective trade in imports and exports to Mexico is actually on par with the imports and exports that we have with the entirety of the European Union, which is the largest trading bloc that we have as a trading partner anywhere on the surface of the planet. So conducting any sort of military operations against Mexico runs a great risk of really screwing over those integrated supply chains that deal with cars, electronics, medical devices, and textiles, which generally wouldn't be considered that great for the U.S. economy. If you think cars, electronics...
And also, by the way, it's like how when they say they're going to go attack the cartels in Mexico, like it's sort of like an open secret. It's kind of like an understood fact that the cartels and the government have a very interesting relationship inside of Mexico. They don't necessarily work hand in hand, but there's a very large influence, vice versa, between those two forces, the cartels and the Mexican government. There's a huge relationship because the cartels hold so much power. They basically have a military of their own. They're extremely well armed. They're also pretty well trained, at least depending on which cartel you're referring to. They're pretty well trained. So they hold a lot of leverage inside of Mexico. So when the U.S. says they're going to strike the cartel, they're basically sort of de facto actually kind of attacking Mexico itself because it's basically a faction of the government to a certain degree. So, I mean, they lobby people, they do things like this. So it's like, how do you separate the cartel from the government? If you're going to start an operation like that, it's going to be nearly impossible to separate the two.
Also, on top of that, if these supply lines get greatly affected by this action, cars are going to become more expensive, electronics will become more expensive, medical devices will become more expensive as well, and also textiles of most varieties will also become heavily expensive. You can actually get a little bit more of a trade breakdown if you go and read about the trade relations between Mexico and the United States, but as a singular national entity, Mexico is actually the most important one as far as U.S. trade and business is concerned, meaning that conducting any sort of violent actions against Mexico, the state, for any purposes, would be ill-advised and probably result in pretty significant economic calamities that would happen here on the home front within the United States of America, which would only worsen the already tough economic situation that the U.S. is dealing with currently. So I would generally be against that. And I do know that a lot of people are going to say, but what about the cartels? Well, that's a little unfortunate. I'd say that the first thing that we could do is maybe tell people in the United States to stop sniffing down so much crack. Maybe the hot dog man needs to, take a page out of history here and there, or maybe take some better life advice, and maybe we'll see that their business starts getting cut down to where that really won't be a problem because there won't be anyone buying the stuff. But secondly, maybe the other thing that we need to do is maybe just try and continue on with what we've been doing for a while, which is generally just trying to whittle down the cartel the best we can without completely collapsing the house of cards that our trade relations exist on with everyone in the world, because that's how trade works. Doing stuff that is basically bringing a sledgehammer into a china shop generally ends up poorly, even if it is for a good cause. And that's why you don't really want to go in like, you're just honcho boy out of your trailer in the South, slamming your ATV into a berm of mud, because it won't end up well. There's great examples of that all over the world. I mean, there's a great example of that with Venezuela. We still can hardly get the Venezuelan government to work with us after we took Maduro out, and we said that that was going to happen, and it happened. So, maybe it's a better idea that we just kind of try and slowly work on whittling away the cartel, because I'll tell you this, I didn't see the Soviet Union going to war with the United States and nuking us into high hell because the mafias basically ran all of the major cities in the United States from about the 1930s all the way up until about the 1970s. I didn't see anyone coming and doing anything about that and acting like the U.S. is a demon of the globe because the mafia runs the major cities in this country. And I don't really know why in the hell we're acting like the cartel is the number one problem to where we have to obliterate all of our trade relations and such to be able to deal with it, because it's going to cause far more damage than it ever fixes. So, that's what I'd have to say. That's my 2 cents on it. There can be a better way to deal with this, because I'm obviously not for the cartels existing, but I'm also not for completely collapsing our largest trade market at the same time. So there has to be some way to meet the two without completely destroying the trade relation side of things in general. But with that, we are going to be moving on out of Mexico for a moment, and we're going to be moving on into a little bit more of U.S. news. And the U.S. news kind of impacts everything that's going on around the world right now. But before we get on into it, I do have to say, I gotta thank you all for being here so far tonight. We've actually gotten up to about 17.2 thousand live viewers at the peak tonight, and over about the course of an hour and 10 minutes, we've had 76,000 people watch this channel. That's a large amount of people, and we are greatly appreciative of all of y'all watching so far. We hope that y'all been enjoying our news and our coverage. I hope that y'all have really, found it to be well researched and well analyzed. But before we move on into the rest of our news, which generally deals with most of the developments out of Washington today, and also a little bit of the carrier strike group news coming out of the George H.W. Bush. Before we get on into that and all of the news that we have out of the Middle East and also the rest of the news that we had in Ukraine, China, and Europe, because we still have a lot to go, I want to make sure that we get 3 questions from the chat, and then we're going to be moving on into all of that major news here in just a moment. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right. So jumping into our first three super chat questions, let's go ahead and jump right into our first one. This one goes to none other than Jerry Coates. And thank you very much, Jerry, for that $60 support. And we do appreciate that
Hey!
very, very much. That's very generous of you. And thank you for helping to keep the channel running. He said, no help for this vet. God save the soldiers.
I gotta say, I hate to hear that the VA is not helping you. That's very unfortunate to hear. But I do thank you massively for the support, helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep the thing running. And so I gotta say, a humongous thanks to you so much once again. And I gotta say that it's a wonderful and incredible thing that folks like you are supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running, being a veteran of the Republic. And not only that, kind of getting screwed over by the government, but hey, hop in the boat. We're all getting screwed over. Like, hey, we're all in the team together. Maybe one day we'll be able to sort this whole thing out. I think right now, folks, there are some keen-eyed people in the Congress at the moment who are kind of starting to look through the stuff, at least from what they're saying right now. But I'll be honest with you all. Knowing people in the Congress, they'll all act like the stuff that's happening right now didn't happen next week, and they'll basically just move on from it to something else, unfortunately. But beyond that, I do thank you massively once again for the incredible support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I just saw someone say something here before we move on to the next one. Someone said, "You're an effing moron. The cartel is why fentanyl's killing kids, and guns are flowing south." Do you not know what the mafia is? Or was? Do you not know what they were? Do you know that they were trading heroin and meth in like most of the cities and cocaine and everything in most of the major cities? I mean, they were having people killed in overdoses from the raw cocaine that they were trading in back in the day. They were poisoning the neighborhoods, as they call it. And the mafia would tell you back then that they never poisoned the neighborhoods, but they damn well were.
And well, the Italian mobs really were generally against the whole drug trade. Like, in fact, if most Italian mobsters, if they were caught trading in narcotics whatsoever, that was usually a death sentence by the family leader. So, I mean, some of them did. Like, there was some back channeling and stuff like that with selling them, but they weren't as heavily into it as some other groups, but especially the Italian mobs.
Nah, man. I mean, like, I've watched a lot of documentaries about the mob. It was around the time of the 70s, really, like the early 70s. They started to get heavy into the drug trade on meth, heroin, cocaine. And generally, they wouldn't do it directly so that way they could try and keep their hands clean, but they would get with other groups like biker gangs or the Crips and the Bloods and start working with them. And they would get the drugs for them, but they would be the ones, the Crips, the Bloods, and the biker gangs that would distribute them. But the mob guy who was doing that would get a little kickback. And I mean, there's like an endless amount of documented examples of that happening. A lot of them were prosecuted for the distribution of heavy narcotics and drugs like that. And not only that, the mob would go around harassing, injuring, and killing people who got in their way. I mean, look at Al Capone in the 1920s. He conducted hundreds of bombings of bars and speakeasies in Chicago that resulted in the deaths of hundreds of people. I mean, that guy was something else. And if you look at any of the mob leaders, they go around beating people within an inch of their lives so they didn't pay protection fees in New York, Detroit, Chicago, elsewhere. I mean, like, the cartel is a problem, and it's a crime syndicate, sure, but acting like it's the greatest evil on the planet, and a similar crime syndicate didn't just exist decades ago within the United States. I mean, that's a pretty big stretch right there, I gotta be honest. And I know a lot of people always want to have the biggest and the baddest boogeyman, but the reality is that with underground crime syndicates like these, you can't just go in and start dropping J-dams on everyone, because if you tried to do that in New York City, the mob would still be around, and thousands of innocent people would be dead all the same. So what in the hell would that gain or achieve? That wouldn't do anything. So doing the same thing in Mexico won't really do much. You just got to deal with it like we dealt with it here in America, and eventually try and find a way to cramp it down until it's basically a non-existent organization, a lot like the mafia is today. So, you know, that would be my 2 cents on it, but I don't know why in the hell people act like, oh my god, the mafia never killed anybody. The mafia killed people all the time. I mean, there's bodies they're finding as the Hoover Dam, Lake Mead is drying up behind the Hoover Dam. They're finding dozens of oil drums that have dead bodies in them that were dropped off there decades ago by the mob from Las Vegas. I mean, hell, it's like, that's ridiculous. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our second super chat goes to none other than Truck and Chef. And thank you very much, Truck and Chef, for that $50 support. And we do appreciate that very, very much. Also, by the way, before I forget, people keep saying the Moscow Times is a Western paper, not from the Russian Federation. I can't remember where people heard that, but it is true that the Moscow Times, I believe, is independent. It's not something that's ruled by the Russian government, even despite the name. So just want to make that clear. But anyways, jumping back into Truck and Chef's $50 super chat, we do thank you for that support, by the way. He said, there there was a NOTAM issued over El Paso last night from 11 p.m. until the morning. They said it would last 10 days, but got suspended this morning. And do y'all know anything about that? Long live the LSA. Thank you, and I'll watch tomorrow morning. And that truck and shove, we had to go over that whole thing a minute ago. That was a doozy to cover that because there's so many different, I guess you could say versions of the story with that. It's just really not very clear which version of the story is true. But the fact that the federal government, the executive got together this morning and met and then decided to lift it, that means they have answers and they decided not to share those answers with the public, which is really honestly a disservice of that they didn't share that with the public. They were honestly, they should be obligated to share that with the public, but they didn't for some reason. So that's kind of irritating. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I hope that we were able to cover it much to your satisfaction, because we actually just got done talking about that a minute ago. And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible. We wouldn't be able to keep it running. And of course, we wouldn't be able to make this thing a continued reality. So humongous thanks to you so much once again for the support. And I hope that you did enjoy that segment, because we actually talked as much as we could about it and what we had and what we know and what is currently being speculated at the moment. And we thank you greatly for helping to make this channel possible so that way we could cover stories like that day in and day out. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And of course, we're about to be moving on and into the next one. And I see a lot of people here, a lot of people giving me pushback on the whole mafia thing, saying you don't have a clue what the cartel is. No, I know what the cartel is. They go around killing people all the time. And there's a giant wall in Mexico City that's made up of missing people posters of all the people that they've nabbed and killed inside of the country. But the thing is that you're kind of forgetting here, because you also probably don't know a lot about U.S. history, is that a lot of people who say were a part of the Irish mobs, the Italian mobs, and so on, they weren't nice people. It's the modern day revisionism of the mafia that makes them look like they were cool, like they're little dudes in suits that were kind of classy and they only used violence when they needed to. A lot of these people were straight up sociopaths. You know, if you ever go and look at their actual stories and what we kind of know about them now after all the dust has settled and the mafia has basically gone back to non-existence, I mean, hell, they were absolutely bloodthirsty. I mean, anyone got in their way, they'd generally be beat to an inch of their life or killed. A lot of people went missing back then, and nobody gave a damn, you know, like, and generally most of them were killed by the mafia. So, you know, I get that people want to make the cartel and the big boogeyman, because how dare we ever make it sound like there was something similar that happened in America, but, you know, you don't sit there and end up getting insinuated into the assassination of JFK by being a little pity any organization that doesn't really hurt anyone, you know? You generally are kind of involved in a lot of stuff. I mean, not only that, the mafia was so powerful, they generally are the ones who worked with the U.S. government to supply the Cuban rebels that we sent down to go conduct the Bay of Pigs. Now, if a criminal underground organization is that big and powerful that the U.S. government basically uses them as a second arm of the government to go arm the rebels they want to go have and invade Cuba, I mean, you know, that's kind of telling you that they're probably significant and powerful enough they were causing a lot of damage. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on, I believe, into the final question of the segment, if I'm not mistaken, Matthew.
Yeah, so this is the final one of the segment, and a big shout out, by the way, to Chris Feilbach, who put in a $50 support, and thank you very much, Chris, for that support, and we do appreciate that very, very much. And Chris said, to be fair to the U.S. government, if I was unexpectedly penetrated by somebody in the airspace, I'd probably freak out too, fire a laser at it, and then also not anybody or not tell anybody about what actually happened, even if they really wanted to know, an LSA. But I mean, they really have a duty, Chris. That's my thing. Like I see your point there. If the U.S. was caught off guard, then they would want to review the situation before making an official statement. But apparently this morning they did review what happened, and then they decided to lift the NOTAM, lift the airspace restriction, and then they didn't make a statement to the public about it. People don't understand this these days, but the government is there to serve us. Like they're there to serve us. So their job is not to hold back all the information from the citizens. We're not children. We're grown adults in this country, and we have a right to know what's happening over our own airspace within reason. Now, obviously, we can't be expected to be notified about classified, government tests. We're not going to be notified about things like that. There are things that must be classified, but things that have to do with public safety, we have a right to know as citizens what is happening over our heads. And the government, when they believe they don't have to tell us that, is really stepping out on a limb by operating like that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that in my honest opinion, let me make sure to reread can you reread that for me again really quickly?
Yeah, he was talking about the airspace being penetrated and all that.
Let's see here. Let me see. I I probably freak out if I were. But yeah, I would say that is the case, but I generally have to agree with Enforcer Matt on that. The Federal Aviation Administration, and not only that, the U.S. government has a responsibility to inform the public of what is happening over our very own skies, due to the fact that there were citizens that could have been in harm's way, whatever that was, and they're not going to be explaining to the U.S. public what is actually going on. The U.S. public has a right to be informed about issues that pertain to the nation, because it is the citizens that vote on who in the world is going to lead the nation based off of what they know is going on and what they believe are the major issues that need to be addressed or should be addressed. And so informing the public about these sorts of instances is an incredibly important thing, instead of always making it into no big deal. Something closing down the El Paso airspace becomes, oh, it was just a party balloon that we shot a high-tech, super advanced laser at. And a whole bunch of guys hanging out on an island and conducting a whole bunch of crimes, it becomes, oh, y'all are just being a little bit too critical. Everyone does that. Let's just drop it and move on, sort of a deal. And that's becoming infuriating these days, because people act like the U.S. government is a step removed and they have a right to not tell everyone because it's embarrassing. But the government isn't a person. A government is a system. It's an apparatus. It has a duty to inform the public of crimes that it has now been notified of and must act on prosecuting if it needs to, or it needs to be able to notify the public on significant threats to the citizenry if they do exist and if they do appear. And whatever happened at El Paso, it apparently posed enough of a threat to civil aviation. They had to close down the airspace around El Paso International Airport, which in most other countries around the world, like Poland or Belarus, not Belarus, but Poland or Lithuania or Estonia or Latvia or Finland or the UK or France or Germany or Denmark or Norway or Sweden or Japan for that matter, or South Korea, they easily tell the public what's going on. They'll say there was a drone over a military base. We fired at it, it ran away. Or there was a drone over a military base, we tried to find it, and then it ran away and we couldn't find it. They never hide anything from anyone, so I don't know why everyone kind of acts like or expects the U.S. government has a right to hide stuff from their citizenry, because much like all of those other democratically elected governments overseas, those governments, much like ours, have the very same rights and duties to their citizenry as ours does, and we should be notified of what that was, so that way, if the U.S. public is to be outraged and demand action over something like that, they can know what it is to demand action over it, whether the U.S. administration wants that or not. But a huge thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so with that, folks, we are now going to be moving on into the rest of the big news. And also, that is what you said, Matthew, but that generally is just adding on like my own personal thoughts, which are somewhat similar to yours, and it is what it is. But moving on from that and on into the East Coast, we were able to hear that the George H.W. Bush appears to be getting ready for deployment, as we are hearing that the Pentagon is now ordering the aircraft carrier strike group to prepare to deploy to the Middle East. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. Additionally, we have also been able to hear that within Washington, there's been some fairly significant developments in foreign policy over the course of the day. At least at the moment, it appears that the Congress is now bringing forward a bipartisan bill to be able to start draining Russia's war chest by trying to crush the Russian oil trade. The DROP Act, introduced by Representative McCall and others, targets the global shadow fleet and third-party middlemen as Washington demands an end to bankrolling of the Kremlin's brutality inside of Ukraine, showing that while the office of the president seems to be pretty lax on the Russians, at least in my honest opinion, it appears that the Congress is not really taking that sort of an approach and believes that the Russian Federation does pose a significant strategic threat, and that we should continue to financially hamper them in any possible capacity that we may have. Additionally, we have also been able to hear that Netanyahu has arrived and apparently talked about Burger Kings and Waffle Houses, and it appears that the president stated he had just finished his meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu, or Mr. Yahoo, as we call him, of Israel, and various of his representatives. It was a very good meeting. The tremendous relationship between our two countries continues. There was nothing definitive reached other than I insisted that negotiations with Iran continue to see whether or not a deal can be consummated. If it can, I let the Prime Minister know that it will be a preference. If it cannot, we will just have to see what the outcome will be. Who in the world wrote this? Rubio? This is not how, this guy writes.
Yeah, honestly, it kind of is the way he writes, actually. It's just very, very vague and kind of bland.
Oh, I mean, it's not like the greatest meeting was ever held. It's great and wonderful, like others. But if it cannot, we will just have to see what the outcome will be. Last time Iran decided that they were better off not making a deal, and they were hit with midnight hammer. That did not work well for them. Hopefully this time they'll be more reasonable and responsible. Additionally, we discussed the tremendous progress being made in Gaza and the region in general. There is truly peace in the Middle East. except for, what's going on in Syria, what's going on with Iran, and what's going on down in Yemen, and what's going on kind of in Israel still. I mean, outside of, basically half of the Middle East, I guess peace in the Middle East has been achieved, if you're not counting half of the Middle East to be a part of it. But it does appear that right now, the U.S. is legitimately trying to go down the negotiation path, which I have to say, a lot like the Israelis are saying, that's a pretty big mistake. Why the hell, I don't even have to go over the speech. Why the hell do we trust the Iranians? I can just leave it at that. Basically, everyone knows what I'm talking about right there. I could go over the whole 9 points again why you can't trust the Iranian government, but that is what it is. It appears that the president's trying to legitimately get a deal. And that makes me wonder, why in the world was the current president absolutely bashing one of our prior presidents when he made the JCPOA, which I would say was an absolutely terrible deal. So now apparently we're just trying to shoot for JCPOA 2.0, but if we do it now under this president, it's the greatest deal we've ever made. Although under a prior president, the truth was had, which it was a terrible deal. So anyways, moving on from that, we also were able to hear that they are considering sending that second carrier as a bit of duplicate news, and we've also now heard that the president is privately considering exiting the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, which is the North American Trade Pact, according to Bloomberg. That was apparently squawked to Bloomberg by some insiders that were privy to the conversation. So it seems that at the moment, the president is considering withdrawing us out of the trade agreement that we have with our two largest national trading partners, which is Canada and Mexico, that he negotiated in the prior term that he was in. So I don't know what's up with that. If the deals are unfair, I mean, he negotiated that deal in his first term. It's like it was the greatest deal ever made back then. It replaced NAFTA. So why in the world is it bad now? That doesn't make a lot of sense. And it also doesn't even add up. The truth of it is, folks, is that doesn't even add up to the larger national defense strategy where they stated we're basically going to be leaving everywhere in the world and just focusing on the Americas. So while we're claiming that we're focusing on the Americas, we're now even distancing our two largest trading partners that are the only countries that share a national border with us for no reason that I can tell of. It would be not that good for the U.S. economy. It would raise the price of most everything that's being imported and exported to both countries. So it'd be harder for U.S. businesses to export their goods to Canada and Mexico, and it'd be harder for Canada and Mexico to import the massive volume of goods that they import to us. So everything would end up becoming marginally more expensive, which I'd have to say we don't really want, because everything's already becoming more expensive as it is. So why in the world would we want to do this on top of that? Moving on out of that, though, we also were able to hear that the U.S. is getting some of that sweet anti-drone weaponry. And y'all know we do it right, because that Raytheon Coyote Block 3 and K really be doing that work. Take a look at this. Wow.
Oh wow! So their new method of trying to take drones down is to send a moving missile by with EW built into it. Apparently it has a short range on it. They have to fly that close to it.
I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, it is apparently a neutral. It's an interceptor. So apparently it fires some sort of an electronic warfare burst, or electromagnetic weapon, or something along those lines, and is able to disable drone swarms, or I guess individual drones. I bet you the unit cost of these things is about 500,000 a pop.
Yeah, who knows? But that's a very odd, in real life practice, how's that actually going to work? Because drones just don't sit in a big cluster like that, like in real warfare. These things actually spread out. They're moving usually pretty fast. So unless they're in a very odd situation where the enemy has grouped all their drones together like this, I'm not really sure how this is going to work in real practice. I mean, it's cool. I will admit it is pretty cool, but it appears to have a short range on it.
Also, does it have multiple charges? How many times can this thing be used before it's unusable, at least in that situation? It's I have a lot of questions about the system. They're not really explaining a lot behind it. I mean, kind of like neat and testing, but I don't really know how well this thing would be used in real life and how replaceable and affordable it is. Because if this thing is a one-use system and it costs $50,000 to $100,000 for each use, this thing is wildly inefficient for what modern drone warfare is. But, we'll have to see. Anyways, moving on from that, though, and that technological weapons development that was kind of impressive and underwhelming at the same time, we're now going to be moving on to Europe, as we were able to hear. Well, actually, really quickly, folks, we're actually going to be moving on into Iran, because we actually do have to make sure that we get to the Middle East news. We haven't gotten to that yet. We got to get to it. So moving us on in the Middle East, we were able to hear that the Iranians, oh boy, oh howdy, the Iranians have done it again. They have stated today the following. Iran says its missile program is not up for negotiation. Oh my God. There were three topics that we have to talk to them about. ICBM development, which is the missile program, nuclear weapons development, and funding the terrorists. So now the Iranians are once again telling us, after they were dying for a deal, they were dying for talks, now they're telling us they're not, and they don't really care, and they're going to keep developing missiles, and there's nothing we can do about that. Ali Shamkhani, sham, get it? It's a sham. An advisor to Iran's supreme leader said Wednesday that missile capabilities are non-negotiable following recent indirect U.S.-Iran talks in Oman. Tehran has opened to nuclear limits in exchange for sanctions relief, but has long refused to include missiles in any deal. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi reaffirmed that Iran's missile program has never been on a negotiated agenda. So, well, it looks like they're back at that again. And it also appears that the U.S. is apparently still trying to kind of lean into the idea that there might be a possibility of negotiating with the Iranians and getting a deal, which would basically just be JCPOA 2.0. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
So we did see earlier in that post from the U.S. president, we covered 3 or 4 posts back, that the U.S. president's insisting on continuing Iran negotiations despite Iran refusing to even negotiate its missile program. So what is he doing? 49% say he's simply stalling for a military act that's coming up very soon against Iran, while 37% said he really wants an Iran deal and he actually means to negotiate, and 7% said it's just a 50-50 chance of either one. So I would say personally, I think they're still stalling for a military action because keep in mind, like we've been saying, they are still moving stuff. Even to this day, they are still moving stratotankers into place. They're moving cargo aircraft in, and it's still happening nonstop. The whole talk that you keep hearing about a second aircraft carrier, that is not necessary to conduct strikes on Iran. It would be nice to have the, the Washington carrier? Is that the one that's currently off the U.S. coast?
The Bush.
The Bush, that's right, the George Bush. That's it, not the Washington. I don't think there is a Washington now that I think about it.
There
but
is.
The
It's
Bush,
in
which
Japan.
Oh, okay. Well, the Bush, which is currently off the coast of the United States, that does not have to be in the region in order to attack Iran. The Lincoln is sufficient. It would be nice to have the second, but it's not a requirement. So I think they're stalling. They're still trying to put stuff into the region. We don't know what was discussed behind closed doors with Netanyahu, but I have a feeling that Netanyahu probably also stated behind closed doors that if the U.S. doesn't act, then Israel is going to unilaterally act on their own behalf to ensure their national security. So the U.S. will probably capitalize on Israel's willingness and probably go for it. That's my guess, because we have enough in the region to pretty much glass Iran if they wanted to. But Enforcer, what say you?
I have a feeling that it might be stalling, but once again, folks, time's running out for stalling. If they're stalling after the end of this upcoming weekend and into next week, I'm going to tell y'all they're not stalling anymore. They're legitimately trying to go for a deal. Because I've been saying that line of saying right now for the past week and a half, because there's only so much stalling that can be stalled, and after that, it's not stalling anymore. They're legitimately begging the Iranians to make a deal with them, no matter how bad the deal is. So that's what I'm going with for now, is that it's stalling, at least at the moment, but after this upcoming weekend, it's not going to be stalling anymore. It's going to be legitimately attempting to get a deal done with people who don't want to make a deal. So with that, we are going to be moving on into the rest of our news of the Middle East, because we did get to hear out of the Islamic Republic of Iran another threat, another one. The Iranian defense minister stated today that the military respond to any aggression with decisiveness beyond anyone's imagination. Well, I did say it's well within our imagination, unfortunately for them. But our response is well out of their imagination. I don't think they'll be able to understand that until it happens. We also saw that they're still fortifying Pickaxe Mountain on satellite photography. Here it is. Take a look at this. There it is. There's the entrances. There it is. There is also the entrances. You can also see the dirt coming in. And you can also see that the tunnels have actually been, filled in. So it looks like they're trying to generally protect this facility as well from possibly being infiltrated by special forces in the midst of a military operation.
Man, it seems like the U.S., and people will interpret this like I'm trying to say, oh, he's just an idiot. It's like, no, I'm making a very specific statement about this one thing. We had mentioned the other day that the U.S. might be waiting too late and giving Iran the opportunity to mine the Hormuz Strait, which is a massive piece of leverage. That's one risk of waiting too long to attack Iran. A second risk is you see all the nuclear sites, they're now getting fortified. So technically, you could still drop a mop on it and it would have generally the same effect, because the whole point of a mop MOP is to be a bunker buster. It's made to get through a bunch of soil to get down to the actual facility itself to explode onto it. But the problem is, though, they're now fortifying it with soil at the very beginning of the entrance, which will make it a little bit harder. If the U.S. wants to go in on the ground or drop bombs onto it, it will make it a little bit more difficult. So the longer we wait, the more Iran has a chance to basically prepare themselves, and it really reduces our chances of success when we eventually go in.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and it is an unfortunate situation to keep watching, and the Iranians, they just keep buying time, so we'll have to see. But moving on from that, we also got to see that some AH-64E Apaches of the U.S. Army's rotary aviation elements are actually, I'm sorry, correction everyone, this is not an AH-64E, as that would actually have the longbow radar and a couple of other additions. This actually appears to be the AH-64A, I believe it would be, because it does not have the longbow radar installed. And that's generally one of the key indicators that you can get for an AH-64 or an AH-60E. But we do have some Apaches that are wandering around in Saudi Arabia right now. They're having a fun time. Call them the bionic wiener, the way they be flying around out there. But moving on from that, we are going to be moving on out of Saudi Arabia. You can tell that we're not part of the Saudi Wealth Fund, I suppose. But moving on from that, the U.S. is also withdrawing completely out of Syria. As we did get to hear that U.S. forces withdrew from Syria's bases, according to Syrian military sources. We believe that means the U.S. just left Tom's garrison, which was the last U.S. base that we were in control of in the whole of Syria. So while we're sitting like, I gotta say, folks, this kind of stuff just makes my blood boil right here. While we are sending 200 U.S. soldiers to Nigeria to go fight one of ISIS's franchises within Africa, we're not keeping U.S. forces around at ISIS HQ in Syria to be able to stop them from reforming again and getting enough money to send out to their franchises to even increase the amount of terrorism that they're conducting in places like Nigeria and elsewhere around the world. You can't make it make sense. Like, you cannot make that make sense in the best case scenario. There's no way to make that make sense. If the U.S. forces should be anywhere, we should be staying in Syria and Iraq and making sure to keep ISIS down where they're actually at. ISIS does exist in places like Somalia and most of Central and Sub-Saharan Africa, but those are their franchises. Those are like their little offshoot groups that basically answer to the head honchos that operate out of Syria and Iraq. So why the hell are we going to go and try and fight the franchisees instead of the actual main operator of ISIS, which is in Syria and Iraq? It makes no damn sense to me at all. Like, the foreign policy at this point is just absolutely screwed and stupid. And you know why, folks, this is being done? Like, here's the truth of it. The one in Nigeria made the rounds in America for some reason because the ISIS guys there massacred some northern Nigerians that happened to possibly be Christian, but it looks like they were killing everyone they could get their hands on, really. So because of that, we'll send them there. But we won't actually stop ISIS from rising again in the Middle East and ensuring that that sort of a tragedy will happen moreover across the rest of the world, not only within Africa and Nigeria, but everywhere else, including the Indian subcontinent, Central Asia, the whole of Europe, the United States, and elsewhere. It just doesn't make any damn sense to me at all. It drives me crazy, folks. It really does. Because it's like common sense. Like, the way I'm explaining it here, you don't have to, like, there's no way you can tell me the president knows more than us, so therefore this makes sense. That still makes no damn sense, even if you knew more. If you knew more, you'd know that that's a bad idea to withdraw everyone out of Syria and Iraq. Basically let that go to hell because Jelani isn't stopping ISIS, and then go send 200 guys down to Nigeria on a vacation to go basically conduct strafing runs on some ISIS guys in the desert in the northern part of that country. It makes no sense. We did get to see that more U.S. airlifts are being conducted at the moment. And we also saw that an RC-135R Constant Phoenix was operating within the area of the Eastern Mediterranean, doing its thing, taking air samples and all that fun stuff. So, you know, well, we'll see what comes out of that. Probably nothing, but it's an interesting flight to say the least. There were also more U.S. airlifts that were going on, just to show you all those as well, since I just brought those up. A large amount of Stratotankers took off today from the United Kingdom, and they currently flew on down either to Muafak Air Base, the Prince Sultan Air Base, or the Al Adid Air Base. Additionally, we also saw that the Israelis are apparently attempting to move forward with some sort of an annexation of the West Bank, which has generally even been opposed by the President of the United States, as we were able to see the Israeli APCs enter Jenin earlier today in this clip right here. Well, interesting with
Who
that.
makes those things right there? Well, like, who are those made by?
I actually don't know. I don't know what kind of wheeled APCs. Let's see. It's an Iton armored. Let's see. Let me pull that up. An Iton APC. This is made by. Let's see. The Merkava and Armored Vehicles Directorate in the Israeli Ministry of Defense. So these are actually home built by the Israeli Ministry of Defense.
Interesting. Oh, does it say what powertrain it's using? Because that engine sounds extremely familiar.
Let me see. It uses a MTU 6V890 diesel engine. It's a 6.67 liter.
Is that a V8, by the way? Because it sounds like a V8. It sounds like a crate motor, actually.
I wouldn't know that. Let me see if it references anything like that about here. Let's see, weighing 35. Damn, this thing weighs as much as a T-72. Good lord. That's a lot of weight
Damn.
on that thing. Let's see. Has a top speed of 90 kilometers an hour. It can carry 12 soldiers and 3 crew. It can be equipped with spikes and a 30 or 40 millimeter gun. Let's see here. Doesn't really say a lot about the power plant, sadly. So, I mean, it might be.
It's got to be a V8. Like it sounds like a diesel V8 to me. It sounds pretty good. That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, it does sound pretty good, but it appears that the Israelis are kind of moving on with something that we really don't support here in the United States, which is the annexation of the West Bank. That's actually what we hear they're trying to do right now, and I don't really think that's going to be doing anyone any good, to be entirely honest with y'all. Because I have a feeling that the Palestinian people who kind of hate the Israelis and the Israelis who kind of hate the Palestinians, I don't really feel like this is going to go over well with the Palestinian people. I feel like this is going to just radicalize them even further and keep this bloodshed going on for a good while longer. So, I guess it's just, Israel activities. Like it is what it is. I'll be honest with y'all, there's never going to be a peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis, because whenever the Palestinians stop, the Israelis start, and whenever the Israelis stop, the Palestinians start. There'll never be, I can never see a legitimate solution between these two countries, because they're, well, not countries, but groups. They're basically impossible, to work with and try and actually get them on a consensus with each other. But anyways, moving on from that, though, a lot of people are talking about the U.S. withdrawing out of Syria. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? Wonderful and the greatest move in human history, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so to give you all an idea of exactly how big this withdrawal is, we were at 8 bases inside of Syria that U.S. forces were stationed at. We're down to 2, so we've basically almost getting very close to fully withdrawing from Syria at this point. Considering that we had 8 bases, now we only have 2. So this most recent withdrawal was from the Al Tamf base inside of Syria, and that's where we saw the U.S. forces withdrawing from. So, what are your thoughts? 42% said that's bad. We should not leave Syria, while 29% said that's good and let's get out of Syria as the United States forces, and 17% said it's fine as long as ISIS is gone. So we were told back in 2019 that the ISIS caliphate was defeated. It turns out that you really can't defeat ISIS in a consolidated manner quite like that, because they really don't operate like that. It's not like a really solidified group. They're very loosely organized and they're spread out. So to say that you destroyed something like that is really a far-fetched thing to say. So they were still around, it turns out, and now they're reconstituting themselves, especially inside of Syria under Jelani's new government. It seems like they have a new breath of fresh air, which is not a good thing whatsoever. So I would say the U.S. should keep enough forces in Syria to be able to handle the ISIS prisoners. It looks like they tried to get a good portion of them out of Syria, but now some of them have escaped, as we've confirmed over the last couple of weeks, and they're now on the loose. So the U.S. is basically going to be relegated to drone strikes inside of Syria, targeted drone strikes against each one of those escaped ISIS prisoners, because now we don't have troops on the ground to properly go track them down and deal with them one by one. So I'm going to say it would have been fine to leave as long as ISIS is gone, but fully withdrawing while ISIS is still a threat, that could be a bad idea. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say I would definitely be with the group that says this is a terrible idea and that we should not be leaving Syria. This is an absolute mistake, an unbelievably bad mistake, to leave Syria in the situation it's in right now. Jelani clearly leans sympathetically towards ISIS. That's why his armies are going around releasing these people in the thousands whenever they get the chance. So clearly these people are going to be reforming. I mean, there's already ISIS cells that we know of that are operating in Syria. They just killed 3 U.S. soldiers in Palmyra. about a month or two ago. So they're there and they're operating. So now we just let thousands of them off into the wild because we didn't stop Jelani from taking over the prisons and having them released. So now what they're going to do is that they're going to get thousands more members to join them in their little camps across the country. And now they'll be able to go gallivanting around trying to take the Conoco oil fields and others to be able to try and get themselves some money to start up the terrorist operations again. And because there's no U.S. forces there, it's going to either grow rapidly out of control to where we have to go back there in full force and didn't deal with it, or they're going to start getting a lot of leeway, one or the other. I mean, it's absolutely stupid. And I don't even get it because it's like, we apparently consider that not to be our problem in the Middle East, but apparently Nigeria's version of ISIS is our problem. Make that make sense. That makes no sense. It's like if the offshoot ISIS in Nigeria is a problem, why isn't the real ISIS in Syria a problem? For people who are about to argue that this makes sense, put two and two together for a second and make that make sense. Like, it doesn't make sense. There's no way you could explain that to make that make sense. And this is going to end up in an absolute unmitigated disaster. And what's going to be funny, folks, is that this will probably end up in an unmitigated disaster in maybe a year or two. I'm sure it'll happen while we're still on air in very recent times in the upcoming years. This is going to end up in absolute disaster, and then the president's probably going to be talking about, who did that? Who in the world would have done something like that? Like Bagram. Because there's no forethought or long-term thinking about anything. It's like this. The game of foreign policy is a game of chess, and right now the U.S. is playing checkers when it comes to foreign policy, and they don't think multiple moves ahead. They just think the next move ahead, and then if it just completely falls apart after that, they're shocked. And it's like, you shouldn't be shocked. You should have seen it coming.
I can see it right now. You remember back during the Obama years, like it was a big deal. Like, in fact, I think back then it was like a revelation that Obama's administration was allegedly using Reapers to go and target these terrorists individually. I think they're going to return back to that. It's going to be basically drones galore going around all over the place, hitting a terrorist one at a time. That's probably what it's going to go back to at this point, now that ISIS appears to be reconstituting itself, which is certainly not good. So that they'll have to go back to those very crude old tactics to deal with it now that the forces on the ground have largely withdrawn.
Oh, this is stupid. This is literally like the Obama era strategy. And the Obama era one, folks, they didn't have anything to work off of yet, so they didn't know what was coming. So I would kind of give them the benefit of the doubt on that. But we have hindsight now, and we saw how this turned out. I'll tell you all what Obama did. Back when Obama was president, ISIS was starting to grow, and the way that ISIS grew back then, folks, this is very complicated to explain because there's a lot of factions involved, but some splinter groups of Al-Qaeda that were extremely radical and didn't want to revamp like Osama bin Laden wanted them to, because Osama bin Laden wanted to rebrand them to basically like the huddly cuddly teddy bear version of Al-Qaeda to make them more marketable to more people. But there were the extremely radical ones in Al-Qaeda who were like, hell no, we're not doing that. So then they splintered off, and then this group called the Fedayeen, which was Saddam Hussein's old bodyguard, and they were extremely radical and also well-trained and highly motivated, and they never went away because how the U.S. did the occupation of Iraq, it was basically a disaster. We didn't have enough troops on the ground to properly occupy the country, so there were a load of armories left just wide open, and that's why the Fedayeen went and armed themselves with a whole bunch of bombs and rifles, and they started to conduct insurgent attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq, and that's why we had to stay there for about 8 years after we invaded Iraq in 2003. But the Fedayeen and the splinter groups from Al-Qaeda and a couple of other groups in the region, they all merged together because they were extremely radical and extremely violent, and they created ISIS, and they basically were already self-sufficiently armed because of the Fedayeen raiding all of those Iraqi armories from years earlier. So then they started to expand basically in the middle of nowhere around Palmyra. And back then, the Obama administration was told, well, there's this group that's kind of like expanding out in the middle of nowhere. They're literally in the desert. They control like a couple of villages. They call themselves ISIS. And it doesn't really seem like they can grow a lot. And so the Obama administration went, well, it doesn't really seem like that big of a deal. They're a pretty small group. They can probably deal with them, like the Iraqi army that's been reformed, they can probably deal with them, and the Syrians will probably deal with them too, because it's a small faction in the Syrian civil war, no big deal. And then over the next 2 to 3 years after that, ISIS just exploded in size. They took over most of what is Western Syria, and they took over most of Eastern Syria, and what is mostly Western Iraq. And once they did that, they were able to control the oil fields and sell the oil on the black markets and make enough money to become self-sufficient in arms and funding, which is what you basically need to go and wage a war, is money and guns. So then at that point, they were out of control, and the Obama administration had sat back and basically let them grow out of control because they didn't really know the kind of potential that ISIS had behind them to grow that large and then pose a significant threat not only within the region, but then conduct terrorist attacks across the entirety of the world. So then when Trump was elected, by that point, Obama had thrown in a load, like right before Trump became the president, we had thrown a load of U.S. forces back into Syria and Iraq to go help out the Iraqis and the SDF to fight ISIS. And then over the next few years under the Trump administration, we effectively defeated ISIS and crushed them, at least as a land-holding group, about by mid-2018. So now we're doing the same thing right now. We're going, they're not a big deal. They're not a threat. Let's just pull everyone out and let them grow in a power vacuum to where they will be a huge problem, and then we'll have to go over there and deal with them for the next 10 years again. That's a bad idea. But anyways, with that, we are going to be moving on out of the middle of the East, and we are going to be moving on and into the rest of our news, which has come from other areas, which we're going to be getting into something very interesting out of Western China in the Gobi Desert. We have seen something interesting posted by a Chinese citizen. Take a look at this. This is in the middle of the Gobi Desert. What this appears to be, from all accounts, is a part of a booster section of a DF-31 ICBM. From what we had known up until now, we did not think that the Chinese were testing out ICBMs at any larger degree, but it now appears that, at least according to this video, they're apparently testing intercontinental ballistic missiles entirely within the borders of the People's Republic of China. So we assume that they're firing from the East Coast, and they're allowing the trajectory of the ICBM to land somewhere within the far west of the country, within Xinjiang or Tibet, somewhere around there, but generally within the Gobi Desert. And that means that the ruins, or more so the remnants of the ICBM after it's expended, are never really found by most people, but this one was found, and this is actually confirming to us that the Chinese are actively testing DF-31 ICBMs within their territorial borders. A little bit interesting.
It looks like the thing's really poorly constructed. I mean, the guy's walking inside of it. It looks like it's made of like cardboard or plastic or something, and it's very flimsy looking.
Man, it is flimsy, but that's to save weight. Paperweight skin, you know, that's how to do it. But there's not really anything in there. Yeah, that's kind of the interesting thing about it. There's not really a lot of anything in that thing. But anyways, moving on from that, because that's a smaller piece of news, it's interesting to note they are conducting ICBM tests, but there isn't really a lot more to get out of that rather than their testing. But moving on from that and on into Europa, we have also been able to hear that Macron has gone out and he's dropping those European bars. Macron, if y'all don't know, is basically the spokesperson of Europe at this point. And France has also positioned itself to largely be the foreign policy and political heart of the whole of Europe at this point, as far as the European Union is concerned. It's very interesting, actually, how the French were able to get themselves in that position with decades of statesmanship largely leading up to this point. But here's what Macron said at a opening statement today at the European Industry Summit of 2026. He stated, "The end of Russia as a permanent provider of local energy, the end of China as a main export market, and the U.S. imposing tariffs on our economy as a coercion mechanism is a game changer, which is why this is not just a transition, and none of these new factors will change in the short run. This is not a temporary shock. This is a clear and structural turning point." And it does seem as though, at the moment, Macron is once again starting to position Europe into being a general... the best way we could describe it is the generally independent sphere unto itself, which is not a good idea. Like, at least for the United States. For the Europeans, it might actually be a very suitable idea for them. But it's not a good idea for us, because this basically means that the only other group in the world that had the same military power as the United States, or very comparable to it, and a fairly comparable amount of funding if you bunch all of the European countries together, is basically just going to be going off and doing its own thing, and that might not be within U.S. interest. It might be within their own, and not considering ours whatsoever. So, I gotta say, it's really unfortunate to see this happening, but... this is the kind of talk you get when you treat our allies like crap. You know, people might wake up to that one day. It's going to be too late by that point, you know. Some people think they're really involved good in the foreign policies, telling people that they're going to take it and they'll like it. But I can tell you a lot, folks, that if you ever sit there and deal with a person and you tell them you're going to do this or else, you're generally not going to be friends with them for long, or they're not really going to like you too much after that. That's just something that you can kind of learn from right there. That's just basic human, perception. It doesn't take a lot to know that, unless if you just don't know how to read people, and you probably don't have any good relations with people in real life. But, who am I to say? I'm just some guy on the internet. It's not like we to get most of this foreign policy analysis correct anyways over the last 4 years. We only get like 90% of it correct. But moving on from that, it is time for us, folks, to move on into Greenland. We've been able to hear that NATO is starting a large military exercise as of today. NATO has launched the new Arctic Sentry mission. The mission is aimed at bolstering security in the Arctic region, which includes Greenland. And look at these guys with their cool kit. And look at that Apache with the sleds, the skis on it. Man, that thing's about to go to Park City.
Man, it's about to ski. It's about to ski right over the heads of those Russians.
Man, I tell you, man, it's about to go running up on them. Ooh, get them. The Russians don't seem to be too happy about that whole development, however. And it seems that they're threatening military action. Russia's foreign minister stated today that his country will take military measures if Greenland is militarized. Ooh, so scary. The Russians are going to send their shitnik fleet out to meet us, and they're going to get obliterated. Unfortunate, really. But beyond that, a lot of people are wondering what the Russians really mean by that and what they're going to do. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are people thinking the Russians are going to do about that?
Okay, so Arctic Sentry, the new NATO military exercise, it has officially begun as of today, and it's really more of a military operation and an exercise because it's something that's going to be on an ongoing basis. It's designed to basically reduce the I guess you could say the superiority that Russia was trying to get in the Arctic regions with their icebreakers and also the military presence that they're currently trying to build up around, for example, Finland, etc. So that's what they're up to, and now the Russia's warning of escalation, especially about Greenland. They're saying if Greenland gets militarized, then they are going to go berserk. But what does Russia mean by berserk? Because they don't really have much of anything left to go berserk with. So what do you think? 44% said Russia will protest, but that's going to be pretty much about it. While 40% said Russia is not capable of responding, while 12% said this will force a Russian response. So like we always say, the only thing that Russia really can do is they can, number one, try to nuke somebody, but that's not realistic because once they do that, it's over for everybody. Number two, they can try to invade like a Baltic state, but the problem is, though, that will likely put NATO to the test, and if NATO decides to respond to it, then you're in a direct conflict with Russia, and Russia is probably not really prepared for that the way they think they are. So rather than that, there's really not much they can do. I mean, they can try to send out one of their nasty submarines that keeps having diesel leaks. They can try to do that. They used to be able to send out an aircraft carrier, but that kind of like got sold off for scrap, so they don't really have that option anymore. So I would say they'll probably protest, but that'll probably be about it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I have to say, one, let me do this really quickly. Let me disconnect you from Discord and then bring you back. So let's see. Oh, he just left. Now Discord. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, you're still robotic. We'll just have to deal with it. It's probably a server issue. But outside of that, though, I would have to be with the 44%. Sorry, everyone, for the audio issues. It's probably a server issue. If anything, it just happens out of the blue these days. And unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do. So outside of that, I would say that the Russians are probably going to lodge a diplomatic protest because they just don't really have a lot of military capacity to be able to make it out there and really do a lot of anything, to be completely frank. Even if they tried to put a lot of military effort into it, it probably wouldn't do too much. So with that, we are going to be moving on out of that little bit of news, and we are going to be moving on back into the capital of Russia in Moscow, as we did get to hear that the Russians are still panicking about Telegram. Russian war bloggers are outraged at the Russian government's view that blocking Telegram is no big deal for frontline troops. They say it's a catastrophe heaped on the disaster of losing Starlink, and that anyone who says Telegram isn't needed is talking complete bullshit. Meanwhile, somewhere on the Ukrainian front line, near Zaporizhzhia. Oh, this is Comrade Vladimirovich. It is day 330 without Telegram. We are currently having to write down our messages to battalion commanders like scribes, writing on little scraps of paper. One day, we hope that our darkness of technology will bring us to the light. But anyways, moving on from that, and that whole deal about Telegram, I got to say, the Russians ought to start learning how to, do that little calligraphy, because I think a lot of them are going to be becoming medieval scribes. Moving on out of Moscow, though, we did get some other major news out of the area of the rest of the Russian Federation. It appears that Bryansk got hit again last night. Take a look at that little roaring flame out there.
Look at that. It's burning up.
Oh, his microphone's good now. Hey, away! Hey!
That son of a bitch is working. Thank God.
Oh, man, what'd you do? What'd you do to fix it?
I did nothing except sit here like a lump on a log and hope it got fixed.
Oh, it must have been a server issue then. I mean, you know, that's like just a little sporadic thing, you know. It happens from time to time, folks. But moving on from that, we also got to see in Michigan there was a couple of more developments. The little factory around here got hit again. It got hit a second time. Look at this. Look at that. Toasting and roasting right there. Oh, look at that. It's nice. It's good. It's real good. We got another one here. Look at this. The smoldering in Michirinsk. Oh, I'd love to see it.
It's hot in Michirinsk. I tell you what, Michirinsk is feeling really the heat right now. I'll tell you.
We're gonna have to go to Michirinsk. Wow! Yeah, man. It's smoking like a pipe out there at Michirinsk. I guess you could say they got some of that Cuban smoking tobacco. Oh, what's this? What? Oh, is that a drone? Oh!
Got blasted by the two-stroke.
Meanwhile, man, they're just sitting outside under the industrial pollution emitter that's right at balcony level for them. They're like, wake up, honey, and smell the sulfur, please. Oh, man.
Have a good whiff of that right there. That's good for your health. Listen to that two-stroke, though, at the beginning. Like, let's hear that two-stroke again. Sound like a dirt bike. What's that little crapper? Man, getting destroyed by the dirt bike crapper, I tell you what.
Oh, yo, this one was taken right outside of the explosion. Ooh. They had the radio turning on there. They're about to say, Vadim, it's sucky, but moving on from that and on out of that little area, it's time for us to get on out of Michirinsk and move us on down into good old Belgorod. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that all of this is a part of a larger Ukrainian drone attack that was conducted over a wider part of the territory of the Russian Federation, including the occupied areas of Zaporizhzhia and Crimea, along with the Russian Don, Rostov-on-Don, Volgograd, Voronezh, Tambov, Saratov, let's see, Lipetsk, let me see here, what else? Kursk, Belgorod, Oriel, Bryansk, Tula, Ryazan, and so on and so on, you know? Basically the whole of southwestern Russia. We also got to see, speaking of that, Belgorod was freaking obliterated overnight. And take a look at this. Holy moly. The Russians, they're finally bringing in some equipment, some tech. They brought in a Tor.
A Tor. In Russia, it's a system to defend against incoming air threats, and to everybody else, it's the onion router.
Man, and I gotta tell you, that thing ain't no onion. It's a lemon. Later on in the day, after we saw that the Russians had finally moved air defense into the city, it doesn't seem to have helped. Blip! Oh, the power's out again!
Oh, man. Those Russians in Belgorod are getting banged by the Ukrainians again.
Man, they're getting banged up abroad! Oh! Look at them. Is that a bomb shelter? Let's see, that says... Let's see. Oh, yeah, it is. It says Raketnai. This is a rocket and bomb shelter.
Interesting. So they were trying to get in, but they weren't quite able to make it. I wonder if the door was locked.
Rob Blood was over there fumbling with the keys the whole time. He's going, like as the bombs are falling, he's like, I gotta get in. Oh my God, they're locked out of the bomb shelter.
Man, they got to keep that thing locked. They don't want the Russian Bliat to go in there and steal the copper.
Man, they don't want the humble Svatniks to get in there and start making a home.
Look at everybody piling up at the door.
Meanwhile, the whole war's going on outside. They can't get in. Oh, and there went the power again. Ooh.
You're still fumbling with the keys. I hear some keys jangling over there in the corner.
Man, I think he finally opened it. He's like, okay, now that the bombs have fallen, you can get in now. Oh my God, that's sad. That is pitiful. But anyways, yeah, as you can tell, Belgorod had the power knocked out again. One of these clips is separate from... Here we go. This is the one that's actually not a duplicate. So here's the other clip that we have of Belgorod getting hit. Oh.
Nasty.
Man, it's dark in Belgrade. What's that song? Vunayomo, это грули, штази цали. Man, like they're about to start singing that one.
Depression is setting in.
I had to sell my kidney for a bottle of booze down at the local liquor store.
Have some Krakow a deal. Hallelujah.
My teeth are melting. Oh man, this sounds really heavy with the drum and bass.
It sucks to live in Belgrade. The property values are going down fast.
Man, I heard that the Homeowners Association put in a complaint to the Ukrainian Armed Forces that they were being dreadfully loud in the night hours.
Ah,
Man.
блядь.
Man, сука, блядь, пиздите нахуй, блядь, шойгу! Это не пропасно, блядь. But moving on out of Belgrade, folks, and generally out of Russia now, it's time for us to move on into Ukraine and the frontline news from theirs. So let's take a little Gandis seas and let's see what we got. Sadly, folks, I do have to let you all know up front tonight, there is no speech from Zelensky, so he was busy today, he was off on business. In foreign countries, so he wasn't able to make the address today, so we'll probably have one maybe tomorrow, but we'll have to see. Moving on from that, though, we do have the location unknowns and the Russian casualty report provided by the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. That we've had to, sadly, folks, kind of move on a little bit from the Kyiv Independent that had the Bobcat skid steer on their infographic, because sadly, due to the power outages that are happening in Kyiv a lot, they actually cannot really get around to that frequently or reliably anymore. So sadly, we're having to move on, at least for now, to the actual Ukrainian Ministry of Defense or the General Staff of Ukraine to get the report. But once the Kyiv Independent is back online, we will be using their infographics as normal because it's always funny to look at the little Bobcat. But outside of that, Mistisa, Keeper of the Records, has stated that 1,551 drones is the new highest daily loss. Damn, it's a record today. It's a new record for drone losses. Holy moly. 235 vehicles is the second highest loss, and personnel losses show a downward trend, but other categories are consistent with the 7-day averages. And let's take a look at what we got today. 820 Russian soldiers have gone the way of the Dodo, along with 5 main battle tanks, 2 APCs, 59 artillery pieces, 1 MLRS, 1 air defense system, 1,551 operational tactical drones, and also 235 supply trucks. That's a pretty good day. We're happy to see it, and we'd love to know it. Moving on from that, now of our location unknowns, it's now time for us to move on and up into the area of Kupyansk, bleed. We are able to see the FPVs hard at work in this area. Take a look at this. This is filmed by a Russian, mind you all. Oh yeah, let me turn up the audio. The Russian's like, oh, bleed, it's a drone. It's getting close.
It's hovering menacingly.
Oh, that thing's kind of loud, a little high pitch. Wait a minute. This is on Twitter. Let me take this off screen for a minute and check something here.
Oh. Well, we got the video, so it must not have done too much damage.
We're all good, homeboy. Skeet, skeet. Let me show you this right here. Here you go. Here it comes. Ooh, bleed.
Oh, man, it just tapped him, that's all. Like a tap on the shoulder, like, excuse me, you're in the wrong trench.
Scusa, c'è questo mai? But anyways, moving on from that and on down the front and into the area of Lehman. I don't know why I just spoke Italian right there, folks, because these people are Russian. They're not Italians. But moving on from that, we did get to see the artillery getting destroyed down here by the Signum unit. Take a look at this Sigma male and all that stuff, you know. Top G, more like bottom G after you took that uppercut. But anyways, we can see the FPV drone coming in. And look, it's a 2S3 Gyansen. It's no longer Gyansen, I can tell you that. Actually, it's not a Gyansen. Sorry, everyone. It's actually an Akitsia. They're about to make sure that it's kissing the ground, I tell you. It's kissing that soil. Oh, here comes another.
The Russians are trying to call us in, but they forgot they don't have a connection.
Boop, 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 boop. Hang on. We are going to contact an operator. Boop, boop, boop. Sorry, an operator is not available. Like, oh, damn it. It's like, no, not the internet.
Yeah, the team. Get on the radio and tell them that they're going to attack. It just speaks into the unencrypted radio and broadcasts it straight to the enemy.
Man, he gets on the radio and it contacts Beijing, and Xi Jinping picks it up. He's like, Sorry, wrong line. They're like, damn it, like it's get on another one. But anyways, we also get to see them striking the Russians down here in the Seversk region. The Ukrainians, they do not discriminate with their drone strikes. They go after anything that's a target of opportunity. This is the Clash group, after all. They've got to get that goulash and send the Russians to the eternal gulag.
Oh, blять, send them straight to the gulag. Oh, look, a fire.
Oh. Chestnuts roasting on an open fire. Man, that's great. Look at that. Oh, and a second one. Oh, man, a Yule log. It's well after Christmas. I mean, I don't know why I'm going with the Christmas jokes right now. I think it's the snow. It's fine. It kind of snowed again on the mountaintops around here, which looks real nice. I just wish it'd snow down here in the valley. You know, I just wish it would, because I would have liked to have seen what that looked like, you know? This place is known for snow. Oh.
Oh, Pooh? Is that
breathe.
you?
Honey. Moving on down. We also get to see the Ivan Franko group doing its job, taking out Russian logistics way behind the lines. And I mean way behind the lines. This is near to Donetsk and Avdiivka again.
Ivan Franco division's got that real like black and white vision going on here. It's really like, goodness, this is a rough view. Look at this. Oh, oh, you drove right into that drone. That was a shame. Yeah, make sure you swerve next time.
Oh, Poret. Oh, I'm sorry. What like that? You've got to go. I'm so sorry. It's statements like that. They really just wear me out, because every single person like you thinks it's an original comment. It's just not. It's not new. If it were a Russian bot, come up with something new at least.
What do you mean?
Ukraine's winning, but they lost 20% of their country. Hard cope, L. It's like, well, yeah, but the Russians planned on taking the whole country in 3 days. So going off of that metric, this is clearly a defeat for the Russians. So, you know, it's like, boo-hoo. You know, go find another job. I got a job for you. That'd be more honorable than the job of being a Russian bot. It's called shoveling shit. That's even more honorable than being a Russian bot. Oh, and we see the Ivan Franko group doing those quick cuts to show where they're getting hit, well, where the Russians are getting hit more. So, oh my goodness, it was a lot of pickup. Well, looks like they won't be picking up anything. It looks like they'll be putting themselves down.
You can't get a whole lot of pickup for your money in Russia because they don't have any money.
Man, I tell you, that's true. I don't have a lot of savings in Russia. Most of that goes to the liquor store. But you can see
they're not saving money, nor are they saving lives. They're doing neither. They're losing everything.
They sure are. I feel like this part of the clip right here is a duplicate. I remember that truck getting hit in that very same way a couple of days ago. Huh. Well, I guess we'll move on from the clip then, because it's neat, but I think they're starting to integrate some older clips into this thing right here. But moving on from that and on into Pokrovsk, we also were able to see some Russian forces getting hit by the 38th Separate Marine Brigade. They call them Marines because they like the manatees and they like to protect the sea life, so they call them Marines for that reason. Oh, look, this Russian's doing a jig.
Oh, oh dear. They didn't even give us the recap on that fellow. They just showed him and then moved on.
Man, I tell you what, but they did take care of some Russians around the Pokrovsk area today, and once again, they're not really making any ground in that area. We also got to see the Ukrainians hitting some Russian air defense in the occupied Zaporizhzhian lands. Take a look. Oh, that's that loud drum and bass. Oh, look, is that the thorium too? Well, how lucky of us. Hit him, Vadim. Oh. Opa, bleh. Oh, it's toasting.
Oh, the general rule is if a piece of equipment has something spinning on the top of it, it's usually expensive.
Opa. Oh, bleh. They got another.
The only exception to the rules, if you see a Russian break dancing on top of a tank, then it's not expensive.
Man, those are the cheap ones. Those are the ones they get for like a song and prayer.
Just see a Russian like standing on his head, spinning in circles. He could be possessed, or he could be having a good time. You never can tell.
Or he could be on the old classic crocodile.
Man, that crocodile makes him flop like a fish.
Man, You know, wait until some people in America find out about crocodile. Geez, they're going to think that the stuff that is sent into the United States is weak. That stuff literally melts your skin, by the way, if y'all don't know. Like anywhere you inject that stuff, it basically starts melting you away wherever that injection point was. It's horrific. If you've ever seen a documentary on it, that's truly one of the most horrific drugs that I've ever seen on the planet. It'll scare you to death. But moving on from that, that was our last clip from the front lines today inside of Ukraine. And due to the fact that we don't have a speech from Zelensky, this is actually wrapping up our little news segment right here, moving us on into the second segment of the stream, to where we get to talk to all of y'all. And boy, is it going to be a blast. We can talk about literally anything and everything except for religion, politics, climate change, whether the A-10 is relevant in modern warfare or not. And, you know, generally, folks, we like to adhere to those rules. So, you know, any deviance from those rules, there's going to be unfortunate consequences. They're just going to make that clear because people are kind of getting a little offhand these days with, you know, basically just shilling political parties and religions in the chat, which is causing an endless amount of fights. But beyond that, though, it is going to be an absolute blast because we can talk about literally anything and everything but those four topics. And I also got to say a huge thanks to the 12.3 thousand people who are still here watching, and the 17.2 thousand people who are here at the peak, and the 102,000 people who have watched in about 2 hours and 20 minutes. I gotta say that we're always honored and greatly appreciative to know that so many of y'all continue to consider this channel to be your primary source of news. I've always got to say that we're happy and greatly appreciative to know that all of y'all are still here with us tonight, listening to this news like y'all have been for years now. And also, by the way, folks, the anniversary of the Lee Spring Army, it's coming up soon. Actually, in fact, the anniversary of the war in Ukraine is coming up really soon. Here in it will be about 2 weeks from now, exactly, about at this point. So we're getting close. We're getting really close. But with that in mind, everyone, we're going to be getting on into these questions. Starting off the fun. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so I'm getting really tired of something. I gotta say it. I'm getting really tired of people asking for the final question segment because some people say it's the best segment of the stream. Some people say that the segment is the lost segment of the stream. Whatever people say, all we know is it's called the final question segment, and it's time to get into it. And it's time to deliver. And jumping right back into our super chats here, we're going to get our super chats, live chats, and then Morse code decoders. But our first super chat of the last segment goes to none other than Fred Freeman, who puts in a $50 support. And thank you very much, Fred, for that support. And we do appreciate that. It's very generous of you. He said, hi, Enforcers. And I finally got to watch the whole intro music. It made me cry. And love you guys. And hello from Alaska. And keep up the good work.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Paul Freeman. I love to hear that you like the intro like that. I tried to make it as patriotic as it possibly could be, to try and encapsulate my heart and soul that yearns for the American people and really does love the nation of the United States of America. Now, that doesn't mean that I like the elected officials. Now, some people get that mistaken. I generally dislike all of them equally, but I do love the United States of America and what the people have done and what the nation has turned into thanks to all the people of the United States. And I got to say that I appreciate you greatly for your massive support and helping this channel to keep on running, and also really enjoying that intro because that intro was made by yours truly. I spent a lot of time, hours, and money in trying to get that thing made, and it came out just the way, actually, it turned out better than I wanted it to, thanks to the orchestra and also the composer. And I always have to give a huge shout out to the composer, Marcos Barilari, who composed all of the scores that we use in the intro, and also the orchestra, Budapest Scoring out of Budapest, Hungary, that did the actual orchestration. They did amazing work at bringing what was generally kind of like my vision into reality, which is really something else. And I gotta say that if it wasn't for the orchestra and the composer, that just would have never been possible. But a huge thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep rolling, Fred Freeman, because you help us to stay on air and keep that intro running every single night. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one is going to go to Nick Hines. And thank you very much, Nick, as well, for that $50 support and also helping to keep the channel running. And he said, with the amount of drinking in the Russian army, do y'all think that they can even send carriers without them getting lost, LOL? And will a coup in Russia be more plausible now that the government can't track comms due to Telegram and other messenger apps going down?
I would say that they can't send a carrier because no matter how drunk they are, they can never get drunk enough to see a carrier because they just don't exist. So no matter what, they'll never be able to send a carrier. That I can promise you. As far as conducting a coup, The likelihood of a coup or some sort of civil dissent because of what actions Russia is taking right now, apparently it was starting to rise, and it must have been a threat that they were looking at that might happen on the horizon, and that's why they're taking all of these actions right now, is to try and make sure that they can surveil every communication in the Russian army for possible dissent, and to also surveil every communication within the Russian Federation for possible dissent as well. So I guess that's what they're doing right now, and I guess that would make it a lot harder to conduct a coup if they all start using Messenger Max, which will be pretty interesting to see if they try and do that. That's generally why, folks. That's generally why you don't want to piss away your rights just to try and get a little upper hand at the moment. It's just something to remember here within the United States of America. You might piss away your rights one day and then figure out that the rights that you just pissed away allow for very questionable suspect and very dubious people with very questionable morals becoming the leaders of your country, and then you're basically beholden to them for the rest of your lives. It's not a good thing. So make sure to remember that, folks. I'm not trying to get political here. I'm just telling you, don't piss away your rights for anybody. That doesn't matter whether you're blue or red. That's basically something you can just kind of, generally adhere to. It's so.
What if you didn't? What if you didn't piss them away and they just happened to disappear on their own accord and you didn't learn about it until a decade or two later?
And they're always getting pissed away. I mean, like the Patriot Act was highly popular with the public post 9/11, and then, everything that's being done under the Democrats or the Republicans, anything that pisses someone's rights away, whoever's in charge, basically their whole camp goes with them. So, if you're forced to do,
I was about to say, yeah, but the catch is, though, like the Patriot Act, and most people knew at the time that the Patriot Act was a horrible thing. It pissed away a lot of rights, but nobody fully comprehended how badly it was going to actually hurt American rights, and nobody could have foreseen the programs that were going to spawn out of that act of legislation. Nobody could have foreseen it. That turned into, by the way, people, like I'm sure people have heard about this, it's turned into a system where the National Security Agency can go into their programs, into a system called X Keyscore, and they can type in machine terms, not in plain language, but they can type it in operators and special characters and symbols, and they can look into any aspect of your life that exists on the internet, including any possible nudes that you've ever sent to maybe like a love interest or something like that. They can see all that stuff, and it's all searchable. They're not supposed to use it unless there's a reason to use it. Like, for example, if you're a person of interest or something like that, and they want to look into it because maybe you're suspected of conducting bad activities involving a foreign power or something like that. But if you have a system with that much power behind it, sometimes people get carried away and it gets out of control. It's really scary if you really know the full extent of everything like that, and if you know the full extent of how the government can coerce companies into complying with these actions and keeping it secret. That's even more horrifying.
And what's even crazier, folks, is that people will go, well, yeah, but it's the internet. Well, yeah, but what about the mail? The federal government never opened up mail historically back in the day and read through every single letter that people were sending through the mail. That's technically tampering with the mail, which is a federal offense even for postal workers to tamper with mail and cut it open and such and read through all of them and then notify the government of any questionable things that were written inside of a letter. That was entirely illegal. It still is illegal, even in the modern day. And I kind of find it a little bit crazy, folks, that we apply that standard of privacy to the Postal Service, but we don't apply that standard of privacy to the same sorts of messages just because they're being sent over a digital medium instead of that of a physical medium like the mail. I find that to be really something, to be entirely honest with you all, and I think that is a major error that we see in the modern day, is that the intentions and rights that were supposed to be a given under the Constitution are generally never applied to modern technologies or mediums, and our rights don't really evolve with technology and society. They basically have stayed in place for what existed when the country was founded, but anything new gets adulterated and warped to an extreme degree to where it has really none of the intentions or spirit of the original founding fathers and their idea of universal liberties and privacies and protections they were supposed to have under the U.S. Constitution.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one because, for example, if the government wants to try to keep track of online activities to sort of monitor terrorism, because that's a legitimate concern, that's something the government has to do. They're tasked with making sure that our borders are safe and also that the country's safe. It's like, do we go as far as to say that they can collect anything and everything? So that way, one day, if someone becomes a person of interest, they can go back into their servers where the information is stored indefinitely. Because these days, there's so much storage that they have at their disposal they can generally keep most information, even metadata, largely indefinitely, actually, because they've gotten such large amounts of storage. In fact, right out here in Utah, not too far from Salt Lake City, out here in Bluffdale, there's an NSA facility that actually has about, I think it's like 6 to 12 exaflops of storage space in it, which is monumental amounts of storage, by the way. We're talking about exaflops. Like your average computer has a terabyte of storage in it. So we're talking about magnitudes larger, like huge amounts of data. They can simply go back and look at that person and find everything from the beginning of their digital life until the present day from those servers, and then use it to whatever their advantage is at that point, which is kind of sketchy, if you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what the Stasi did back in the Cold War, is that they had the phone call log of everyone in the country, and they would just record the phone calls and then document who was on the call, on the calling in and the receiving end, and then they go and catalog those by person. So that way, if anyone ever became a person of interest later in the future, they could go and pull all of the phone call recordings that they had ever made of that person and then just start listening to them and getting a character profile of who they're dealing with, how they psychologically operate, what their general routines are, if they ever mention that over the phone, and so on. It's very similar to that, and I think that that sort of a thing is quite questionable. I find it interesting, because everyone always talks about, like, for example, here, everybody always loves to talk about the founding fathers' quotes in the modern day, like Benjamin Franklin saying that if you give up liberty for security, then you deserve neither. But then whenever anyone's political party comes in charge, then they start pissing away rights down the drain. It's like, oh yeah, you have no right to carry a gun in public around a law enforcement officer, and you deserve to get shot. Like, it's like, that's a constitutional right to carry a gun wherever you want, as long as you're not brandishing it or anything along those lines in an unlawful way. You can carry a firearm however. I mean, you could get in an altercation with police with a firearm on you, and as long as you don't pull the firearm, you shouldn't be shot on the spot for that. I mean, that's just a constitutional right that you have. That shouldn't be something where it's like you have the right to exercise carrying a firearm, but if you do that, then you should be expected to be treated differently by state or federal law enforcement agencies, which is absolutely ridiculous. And then, for example, in the prior party, it was that if you exercised your constitutional right to not do something, whatever it was, then you were going to be punished in some form or way because of that, extra-governmentally, but with pressure from the government to adhere to the specific norm that they were trying to enforce. And nobody ever thinks about it in that way, but if you ever sit there and you ever want to generally think about why in the world are rights disappearing in this country, is because people are always willing to throw them away for absolutely no reason. It's like some short-term gain, like teaching those MAGA Nazis what for, or teaching or owning the libs, and it just doesn't make any sense, because like we're just pissing away our rights to get at some other group in fiction. Like, it doesn't even really get at them, it just screws everyone over. It doesn't make any sense. But anyways, with that, oh man, with that, it's enough of that.
Also, what gets me as well, like some people will, and I get it, like not everybody studies that kind of stuff like that, but some people are saying, wait a minute, like they can't look at, like, for example, you know how people, like, I'm not saying I've done this, but other people will send, like, for example, like nudes to like their love interest or something like that. Like, it happens. Like, I'm aware that people do that. Like, it's something that people do. It's very possible that if you are a person of interest, that someone has looked at that. Like, it's very possible. People don't want to accept that, but it's very possible that someone has looked at it, and who knows what their comments were about it. But the fact that your privacy can be violated like that is really astonishing when you really think about it. You just don't know, and they don't need a warrant for it either. They can review that kind of stuff without a warrant, even though they should technically have a warrant. They don't have to get one, because when you do a dragnet style surveillance like that, you simply access it. Nobody really ever knows you accessed it, and then you go about your business. The only catch is, though, they can't use it in court to prosecute you, because the evidence would have been improperly gotten, so it wouldn't be usable in a criminal case, but they can still use it to surveil you, which is concerning.
Also, I just saw someone say, follow the law, simple. That's always what everyone says, but the thing about that is for folks, and I'm making a general assumption here, that you're probably a political person, and you're saying that because if they had just followed a law, they wouldn't have been shot. But the thing about that, though, is that to folks like you, the law is whatever you want it to be at that moment. So, like, for example, Kyle Rittenhouse can do what he does with a gun in the middle of a protest. That's totally fine. But then when someone else does it on a different political perspective from that avenue, then it's wrong. And the law isn't applied equally to everyone like it should be, to where you have the right to carry around a firearm in a protest. It's basically just subjectively fixed on who's with you. If they're doing it, then the law is fine, they can do that. But if it's someone you don't like and they're doing it, then the law doesn't apply to them. And that's the problem with people these days, is that they don't apply laws as a common standard across every single perspective to where you have a right to do that no matter what, no matter who you are and what you think and all that. It's very subjective to, oh, I didn't like that person, so, they didn't really follow the law carrying a gun around in a protest. But this other guy, though, he did. And it's completely subjective. And that's why people saying stuff like follow the law, it's that simple. It's not that simple, because you basically have to be in your group, whoever that group is, whether you're a liberal or a Republican, to be able to quote unquote follow the law, which is the problem with the country these days.
You know what's concerning? I wasn't going to bring this up, but it's been on my mind all day long. It's really been bugging me all day. I saw today, and we usually don't talk about this, but at the hearing today about the Epstein stuff, there was a photo taken by a journalist, which appeared to show a binder which had the search history of the Congress people in the binder, showing which Epstein files they had viewed. And apparently that was they were privy to that information. Apparently the Department of Justice was, and they were using that to guide their answers that they were given to Congress today, which was highly concerning, because how the hell do they have the search history of the Congress people, and how do they have a right to access that? It seems a bit crazy to me. It seems like that's highly concerning, to say the least. And apparently they were using that to prepare to answer the questions that were going to be asked at the congressional hearing today. That blew me away when I saw it. I was like, surely people see this and they're like, what the hell? They're like, they have the search history of the Congress people. It's like, are they surveilling the Congress people's internet browsing history? Have you seen that photo, by the way, Enforcer? I have the photo. It's on Twitter. Have you seen that?
I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah, that's something else. That blew me away when I saw that today. I was like, you're kidding me. And also, they're stupid enough to bring it in there and flip the binder open in front of the cameras, where they can apparently let journalists take a picture of it. That blew me away.
Yeah, it really is something else. And now I see this person is who I think they are. They say, well, this guy didn't enforce the laws. Yeah, but like I'm not going to get political here, but that's kind of rich, considering that some people don't even want to try and uphold and respect elections these days. Like, say, midterms, for example. Like, it's kind of a little bit hard to like throw stones at one glass house when you live in a glass house. Like, that's really hard. Like, sure, you could bring up something like that, but then when you have someone trying to basically go around and say that maybe an entire constitutional election process should be canceled just for the hell of it because they might lose seats in the Congress, that doesn't really seem to me to also be above board either, to be entirely fair. Not getting political there, but that's kind of just what it is. Like, we're not blind to what goes on here in the United States. We just don't talk about it a lot. But, that's a little bit stupid to always act like your side, or whoever it is, like if you're a liberal, the Democrats are always angels, and if you're a Republican, the Republicans are always angels. Because the truth is that they're screwing everyone over blind, and the people who blindly follow them are too stupid to see it. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on here to our next super chat. This one goes to none other than Marion Deemer, who puts in a $50 support. And thank you very much, Marion, for that support. And we do appreciate that very, very much. And Marion said, Enforcer Matt, when has anything been normal the last 14 months? I mean, you have a point. But I would say longer than 14 months. It's been abnormal since 2019. I would say since mid-2019, the world has been upside down in every possible metric. The economy has been upside down. Everybody's personal lives have, in my personal experience, been upside down. And it seems like time passes by faster. It's a really weird thing. Ever since the Whirly Bird messed with everybody's sense of reality and everybody's perspective, it seems like everything has gone berserk since then, and it hasn't really returned back to normal. So it may just be the way I'm perceiving it. I'm not sure if other people feel that way, but it feels like that to me. I think things have been extremely abnormal. And then obviously after the Whirly Bird, then you had the Ukraine war completely break out. So it was a whole thing. But Enforcer, what say you?
Yeah, I'd have to say it has been pretty wild over the past 14 months, that's for sure. And it only is getting crazier, really. I mean, like, we're having so much news these days that we have to cover. News segments that used to be an hour and 40 minutes long are now almost 2.5 hours just to cover the bare minimum of what happened. That's not even all of the details of everything that's happening around the world. That's just the minor details. And so, yeah, it's definitely been crazy. And I do thank you for the massive support and help with this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I think I have something incorrect here, so I do want to make sure I'm being accurate. I saw a couple people say, including Ms. Disa, that the Epstein files are being viewed in a special skiff. That may explain it, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, because I believe the Congress people were reviewing the unredacted versions of the files, if I have it correct, which were the ones that I believe are still classified according to what the federal government's doing with those files right now. So in that case, then, I'm not totally familiar with all the skiff protocols for classified sensitive information like that, but that may explain why they had it. But it's still something just still seems improper about that they're accessing the searches and then using that to their advantage in a congressional hearing. Something about that just seems wrong. I'm not sure if it's actually improper, like when it comes to the law, but it just seems on its face like it has a bad look.
Yeah, I'd have to say it does have a pretty rough look to it. And I do thank you for support and sharing that with us. Very interesting side of the thing, fairly concerning, but I would have to say, big thanks to you once again for support and help with this channel to keep it running. And also, I gotta say this. I gotta say this one because this is one that's crazy. Someone said, "Well, that's what happens when you get a transparent government. You got to be ready for the good and the ugly. This is just the beginning." There is not like this isn't even political. This is just straight up truth. There is nothing transparent about the current administration at all. And I'm not like I don't even care about the domestic political side. On our end for foreign policy, they are the least transparent I have ever seen over the 4 years that we've done this. They basically tell nothing to anyone. They do whatever they want. And if you ever try and ask them, why are you doing that? Why in the world can you defend your position under scrutiny as to why that makes sense? They basically just go off and cuss anyone out who asks them a legit question on foreign policy. Like right now with El Paso, have we gotten a statement in any reasonable amount of time about what that was about? No. If that was any other European government, they would have already given an answer within the hour that NOTAM was issued, why it was being issued and what was going on. The U.S. government still hasn't let us know, and it's been 24 hours. There's nothing about that that's transparent. I mean, if anything was transparent, then we would already be knowing exactly what was in the Epstein files because the Congress passed a resolution saying that was to be completely published to the public to let everyone know what was in them. Now, if there was true transparency, that would already be out right now with no strings attached. And it's not. And if you look at any other foreign policy situation, like why are we withdrawing from the Middle East? No real transparency there. Why did we grab Maduro? No real transparency there. They pretty much lied to everyone and said it was about the cartels when in reality it was just about the oil. They literally lied up until the last minute until they grabbed Maduro. And then once Maduro was grabbed, the whole cartel farce dropped to the floor like it never existed. And then it was all about oil. I mean, there's nothing transparent about this administration at all. I mean, the last administration was not transparent either, but this one's taking the cake by far. I mean, that's not even a political thing. If you take that as political, you're looking at things with blinders. Because, I mean, hell, on this channel, we sit there and go, what the hell is America doing? We really don't know. Back in the last administration, they'd at least drop enough crumbs that we kind of piece together what they were going to do and when they were going to do it. In this administration, we have absolutely no damn clue. And some people say, well, that's good. That's not good. That's not good at all. Because if you're going to try and claim that you're transparent, but you're even harder to follow because you're that least transparent as possible, then you're not transparent. That's the complete opposite of it. So, I hate to burst people's bubbles there, but I find it really hard, like, especially on our end where we're actually having to put together the news and cover it and try and make sense of it and tell you all what's going on. I find it really crazy that some people will say, probably having no experience of having to parse through all this news every day and figure it out, that this administration is the most transparent ever. It certainly isn't. I mean, the last administration was probably one of the least transparent, and this one's taking the cake from that one even. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here. Also, by the way, I did a little quick research on this just to check and see what people were saying. So, just by the way, in case you're not familiar with what a SCIF is where you go to view classified information in a secure environment. It stands for Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility. I believe that's what it stands for. And inside a SCIF, it's like a very highly armored little box. Sometimes I think it's containers, actually. They've converted into these like highly armored boxes. And they have computers inside of them, and you have to use your smart card to go onto the computer to view these documents. But it is true, though, that it's highly monitored. Everything that you access in a SCIF on one of those computers is monitored for who accessed it, verifying who it was with their smart card. So it would be tracked. But my question still remains, though, can someone take the tracking data from the skiff in the government and then use that to guide their answers in a congressional hearing? It seems a bit strange. I'm not sure if there's anything directly prohibiting that, but it seems a bit odd that they would do that, because technically they're logging people's information in the skiff because they're trying to do counterintelligence to make sure that someone's not going in there and trying to go get information that they're not supposed to have access to. So that way someone can't make off with a bunch of secrets, like it's happened in the past. There have been people that have intentionally accessed those systems to download documents and then run off to a foreign country with them. And they're trying to prevent that by logging the information. But I just don't know about the whole thing about getting the logs to use them in the hearing. Seems a bit odd.
Yeah, I would have to say that does seem pretty odd. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Sligoy the Sauce, who puts in a 50. And thank you very much, Sligoy, for that support. He said U.S. trade remittances to Mexico is $61.8 billion per year, and 6.3% of that is their entire GDP, and that's intense leverage.
Mexico has a far larger GDP than $60 billion. If I'm hearing that correct. Can you reread that again really quickly, Matthew?
Yeah, they said, let's see here. They said, Sligoy said U.S. trade remittances to Mexico is $61.8 billion per year, 6.3% of their entire GDP. That's intense leverage.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said 630% of their entire GDP. I was like, their GDP is far larger than that. Kind of, but not really. Because, that's not really that's weighing it in the vacuum, but that's also not weighing the kind of consequences that could happen, say, if all of those interconnected supply chains from Mexico to the United States and back and forth get disrupted as a result of that. It doesn't really matter what the U.S. government's relation with Mexico and trade is. It really matters what the citizenry's relation with Mexico and trade is, and it's the largest in the world for a singular country, meaning that the fallout from a trade collapse with Mexico or any sort of a trade crisis with Mexico would actually be as large as a trade crisis with the whole of the European Union. So generally, I'd say, I don't really, I would just be completely frank. I don't really know why we're always looking for leverage or a way to basically kind of screw our allies and tell them to take it up the rear end and like it. Because that's going to get a lot of people to hate us in the long run. You could try and do that, sure, but you're going to turn the Mexican people against us. They're going to elect a government that does not like the United States, and they're eventually going to start distancing themselves from us if they can, which they probably will be able to. I mean, look at Canada. I mean, they went from Trudeau, which generally wasn't a big fan of America, to this Carney guy, and he basically does not like America at all. And it's just going to keep sliding down that slope of each and every leader after that is going to be more and more anti-American because the people of these countries are going to dislike America even more and more. If you look at any country in Europe right now, they are generally having their popular opinions turning against the United States. And sure, you can say, well, NATO, we do this for NATO and we do that for the EU and we can screw them over this way and that way. But the thing is, though, is that if you do that, a lot like people in America are saying that Europe is screwing us over every day, look at how many people in America hate Europe and want to screw them over because of the perceived belief that Europe is screwing us. Now we're screwing the Europeans over intentionally. They're going to hate us as much as some Americans hate them. They're going to start voting in governments that are certainly going to be moving away from the United States. And you got to think about those sorts of long-term implications there, because you can't just do stuff like that and let it slide by. Because if you dealt with a person-to-person interaction, say, where you did that to someone, like you were like, oh, I'm a dad of this kid and, he's in my house, I'm going to treat him like shit because I can. When that kid grows up, he's probably going to have nothing to do with you because you treated him like crap the whole time he was growing up. And sure, you could get away with it when he was growing up, but once he starts paying his bills, you can promise yourself that he's probably never going to be talking to you again. And do you want to be in that kind of a position in the future? It's not going to happen this year. It's not going to happen next year. But in a couple of years down the road, it's not going to end out well. And that's how that ends out in foreign policy as well. If you treat people really badly, they're eventually going to walk. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep it running. But I'd say that generally with Mexico, I think that we ought to try and deal with the cartels in a way that that wouldn't have a high chance of disrupting the international trade we have with Mexico. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Jack C, who put in a $50 support. And thank you very much, Jack, as well, for throwing in that generous support and helping to keep the channel running. And he did not leave a comment, but he did leave a super sticker, though. And the super sticker I had on it, I was trying to scroll back up to get it real quick. It's the gaming controller that said super effective. And thank you very much, Jack, for saying that we're super effective, and we do appreciate that. And Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you so much for saying that we're super effective. We thank you greatly for the support. And we love to know that you think that we're super effective. We try our best to be. And so a huge thanks to you once again. I hope that has addressed that incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 50 from none other than Fred Vreeman. And thank you very much, Fred. He said the Iron Beam seems pretty effective. And what do you think?
I'd say that generally laser-based weapon systems, whether they be the Iron Beam, the Dragonfire, or even the Thor inside the United States, they have very promising futures because they're incredibly efficient, and also they're incredibly effective from what we can tell, especially in short-range air defense. So they are definitely going to become the future of short-range air defense systems. Like soon in the future, we'll probably see that the NASAMS and also other systems like that will probably be completely retired and replaced with these sorts of laser-based air defenses. Hell, even in the future, we might see that some of the long-range, over-the-horizon air defense systems, like the Patriots and such, could even be replaced by these if they become powerful enough and long-range enough. So a huge thanks to you so much for the support, Fred, and I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to none other than Ross Nib, who also throws in a 50. And thank you very much, Ross, as well, for that support, and we do appreciate it. And Ross said, it's balanced news and analysis we want, and you fellas never fail in your aim to provide that. I thank you both for it, and LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Ross. We try our best. Some people will never get it because they're too deep in the political Kool-Aid. But when we criticize people, it's with good purpose. Like we never toe a party line in the United States, and I'll be damned if I ever do, because basically you're just being used at that point by someone else until you end your usefulness, and then you get discarded basically. So we'll never do that, and we try and always be as balanced as we can, but critical if we need to be. And I think some people might be realizing this. We're being a lot more critical recently because there's a lot more things to be critical about, which I've explained a million times why that's the case, and people just don't get that now. I guess they just don't get it, Ross. But I thank you so much for appreciating it and getting it and greatly enjoying our news and also our coverage and analysis of major situations around the world. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
Also, by the way, the Brits are here, by the way. I'm not sure if you know, but the Brits are currently doing some stuff out in Nevada. I'm not sure if you've seen this. In southern Nevada, they've got refueling tankers. They got, it looks like a fighter jet up in the air. The UK is full on out there right now. It looks like doing some refueling exercises. Looks like they're being observed by the U.S. Air Force in a private jet, too.
Oh, look. They have a little Voyager. They have a Typhoon. How neat is that? That is so neat. Look at that right there.
Man, that must be the life. They just they flew in from the UK straight to Vegas, and then they're spending a few days out here to go do some drills, it looks like.
Gee, what are you fellas doing over here in Las Vegas? Gambling, brother. Man, I'm putting it all on black. Huh?
They're gambling. They're out here making sure they can get a little bit of refueling money to go back home.
We're getting all that gambling money, governor. Man, it's like, yeah, get it. But anyways, with that, pretty cool, actually. That's really neat. And also, anything going on up? Oh, wow, Utah's completely emptied out. Wow, there's not really a lot of U.S. air activity over the United States tonight. That's so interesting. But there are the C-17 flights still going to the Middle East. You can basically tell all of the C-17 flights that are going to the Middle East because they all have RCH as their call sign. That's what I've realized at this point. Like, see... This one's returning from Europe after a trip to the Middle East. This one is, let's see, any others that are going there right now? Oh, actually, they're all coming back. And then the ones from the States, they're now leaving. So you can actually see all of them are RCHs. So if anything's going to CENTCOM, it's got RCH in its call sign at the moment. They'll probably change that now. That's such a waste of money to fly it that far over there like that. They ought to just transport it. Yeah, they ought to. They ought to. I mean, I tell you, this government excess, folks, It's so much. I mean, this is ridiculous. We really need to cut down that government spending. That's why we're going to give everyone $3,000 checks, increase the military budget by $500 billion, and then we're also going to increase even larger spending bills because nothing says cutting down the government budget like increasing the budget. That's for damn sure. Anyways,
Also, by the way, I was just joking about the whole wasting money on transport thing. You gotta send your stuff over there. Without the air defense being in the region, we're pretty much blind and we're not able to defend ourselves. So it's needed. Like, I'm just joking about that part.
yeah, I'd have to say. But with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Jerry Coates once again. And thank you very much, Mr. Coates, for that $30 support. We do appreciate that. And he said, "Who are you, No Cap? I love this LSA."
Hey, and who are we? Well, we're the enforcers. I'm the enforcer. Matthew's enforcer. Matt, he's the one who's not talking.
I'm nobody. I'm a boxcar and a street racer.
Oh, okay. Well, you can be what you
You
want.
haven't seen that? Oh, come on, man. You hadn't seen that? You hadn't seen that crazy loony talking on that interview? You know what I'm talking about? That guy who was like the loony nut that was involved with like CIA stuff and everything like that. You hadn't seen that guy? I'm trying to remember his name.
I keep on seeing
Charles Manson.
Oh, dude, I keep on seeing those memes of that Kiriakou guy where, they have his voice and he's like, okay, so I had to go to the CIA and then Colin Powell called me up and he was like, where's the Iraqi CIA building? Or something like that. And it's like those memes. And like,
or no, that you said, I see that one with him. They said, yeah, the agency told me I need to go meet with this person, and she was uglier than a gargoyle, and they said you're gonna have to, you're gonna have to. I said anything for Uncle Sam. Like, okay, he was dedicated. He was gonna go all the way for Uncle Sam.
You see, I went to this cafe and I went in there. And I came back to the FBI and I told them that this guy is like, and it's like, what the hell? And they're like, you're going to have to pretend to be gay. And I'm like, is this what the CIA's wasting tax dollars on? Like these stories? I'm like, what the hell are these?
He did it though.
He did it all. Like he did it all.
He pretended he was, and he got what he needed.
Man, honestly, man, like listening to those stories though, folks, you sit there and just hear how ridiculous they are. And it's like, either these stories are made up or the CIA is spending a lot of tax dollars on things that seem to be silly. Like, it's one or the other. Like, it gets things done. Like, if you listen to the greater story about what's being done and how it's going down, it is getting information that we need. But, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous and silly how it's gone about. Like, it doesn't seem like James Bond kind of stuff. It almost seems like a comedy movie in, like, real time. But you're working for the CIA. It's almost like it's more of a comedy than anything. It doesn't really seem that cool. It just seems silly,
Well, they all do it the same. Like the CIA, the FSB, all the agencies do the exact same stuff. Like for field work, it's all about trying to cold pitch people, trying to get people to become your operatives inside of countries, which it can be very difficult, obviously, because you're trying to convince people basically to commit treason against their country. That's what you're trying to do there. So they try to wine and dine the people. In that guy's case, he was trying to pretend that he was a certain persuasion, so that way he could try to get some information and get some favor.
He was trying to pretend that he was a plumber and that he lays pipe. like that's what he was trying to pretend to be.
He was doing all that. It's wild. Like no, obviously they don't tell people to go around having sexual relations like that anymore. Like they don't do stuff like that anymore.
Oh sure.
I think way back in the day that was like somewhat that was common. Like they would actually like get engaged and stuff like that, but not anymore though. At least they're not supposed to. So the Russians, by the way, they still do that heavily. Like they're still heavy into that stuff. Like the whole like honey pot and honey trap and stuff like that. They do that heavy. But the CIA doesn't do that at least in that frequency anymore.
I'm gonna be honest with you. The CIA does everything that every other foreign intelligence agency does. They do it. Because, they found out about those sleeper agents not too long ago. They're doing it all. I mean, why, an intelligence agency, why in the world would they limit themselves by doing less than others? They're basically putting themselves at a disadvantage.
They don't want to pay for the medical treatment later when someone catches a disease.
Well, I mean, if you catch the clap, you're gonna get a round of applause from the top brass at CIA. Hey, let's give it up for them. Yay, we got the info, and we bagged al-Baghdadi. But anyways, oh man, I'm telling you stuff, folks. This stuff is crazy right here. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
And our next super chat's going to go to none other than Duncan VR, who puts in a 30. And thank you very much, Duncan, for that support as well. He
Hey!
said, Bamu Wolf Quack. That flying blob was a spy balloon piloted by Airman Putin for the Burger Fund. And it's time for Enforcer Voices. That is very tired, Zelensky. Enforcer, you'll be the other fellow. Baba. I say, Duncan, if you'll give me the chance, to get into the voice, maybe we can come up with a little bit of a impersonation of Mr. Zelensky. But Enforcer, what say you?
Do you like Burger King? Do you like
Yes, I like
hummus?
pickles and a little bit of relish.
You know, when I go to the restaurants in Tel Aviv, they come up to me and they ask, what would you like? And I always say, bring down the hummus. And they bring it down to me. It's very good. You ought to try it sometime.
You know, I've been thinking about Tel Aviv Yafo. I've been thinking we should turn into Tel Aviv Nafo.
You like dropping bombs? I got 2,000 pounds.
But I have to.
I love dropping bombs. I'll drop them on anything, especially when that prosecution's coming back up. Then I go, hold up, everyone. There's someone that needs to be bombed. And then I go and take care of it. It's a great, wonderful thing. This sounds very close.
I'm not here to play cards.
This sounds very close to Richard Nixon. Some people are asking, are you a crook? Well, I'm not a crook.
but anyways, a big thanks to you for the support, Duncan VR. Incredible, massive support. Helps this channel to keep running. I hope you enjoyed the voice impersonations. I hope that they were what you were looking for. And so a big thanks to you once again for the support and help this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Pleasure Burn, who puts in a $25 support. And thank you very much, Pleasure Burn, as well, for that support. He said, what has a head but no brain? Lettuce. I know not your first choice, was it?
Ha! I was going to say politicians. Oh, my lordy. Oh, man. So many of them were fried today, folks, when they actually got to see those, unredacted ones. They were like, oh, my God. And I was like, yeah, that's what you should be thinking. You should be thinking, oh, my God. You should have been thinking about it for a while now. Man, what do you know? Man, I tell you. But beyond that, a big thanks to you for the support. And, I was thinking something different, but I had a lettuce. That's a pretty good one. I had, but no body. Oh, man, I'm telling you. Oh, man, I get no respect around here. Oh, man, I try and be the guy cranking jokes, and then someone throws in a super chat and they up me one. Oh, man, I'm telling you. Oh, man, it's a rough life, I tell you. Oh, it's a rough one. Oh, man, the other day I was trying to cover the news, and somebody told me what the news was. Oh, man, I'm telling you. Oh, man, I get no respect around here. Oh, man, and some people, oh, man, they're really stupid. Oh, man, my family was real stupid growing up. Oh, man, my ancestors, back when the Civil War happened, instead of fighting for the North or the South, they fought for the West. Oh, man, I'm telling you, they're real stupid people. Oh, man. But beyond that, big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible. And I hope that you enjoyed the voice impersonations, Duncan VR. And with that, it's time for us to move on and into the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to My Trucking Travels, who puts in a $20 support. And thank you very much, My Trucking Travels, for throwing in that support. He said, good evening to the enforcers from your overnight truck driver, Fort Stockton, Texas to Phoenix, Arizona. And you'll have me dying in your last stream. Oh, I'm sorry about that. He said, talking about going deep into aliens, LOL. Take one from the chat.
Thank you for the support. I'm glad you enjoyed that trucking driver. And where is he at right now? Where's he driving?
To Phoenix, Arizona.
Phoenix. He's driving to Phoenix. Man, back on the interstate, I says. I tell you something, trucking driver. You stay in the U.S. Southwest a good bit. I think the other day you were driving from Arizona down here somewhere into Texas. Weren't you driving into El Paso? I think, if I remember right. I remember something about that.
I can't remember. Do you ever go into Mexico?
Do you ever go into New Mexico, the new and improved Mexico? Like, do you ever travel through there? Because
man, I feel like it'd be a treacherous truck driving route if you were driving from Mexico to the United States. I feel like it's treacherous because the cartel set up roadblocks down there, like in those border cities and stuff like that, and they try to hijack stuff. I don't know how common that is with like semi trucks, but I've seen videos of people almost getting hijacked that driving to Mexico. It's really sketchy.
Yeah, it is kind of sketchy down there. But you know where it's really sketchy, Matthew? In that foreign country of Puerto Rico. Now, that is one hell of a scary country right there. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I heard it's a little bit interesting.
You know, I've heard that that president of Puerto Rico, he's a crazy guy. You know, he says a bunch of crazy stuff down there. You know, what's even crazier is that, like, it's insane, you know, how Puerto Rico as a country runs. I mean, they have no electricity. They have rolling blackouts all the time. They have basically no infrastructure. I mean, who in the hell is ever running Puerto Rico is doing a terrible job. I mean, you know, like, I heard that it's some sort of a rabbit, but they gave him the nickname of Bad Bunny. And they say that he's a bad bunny because he's not keeping anything up. I tell you, it's crazy stuff right there. Also, I'm just kidding around, folks. It's actually an overseas U.S. territory. I already know that. I'm just kidding around and being sarcastic here because, funnily enough, for most of the U.S. public, most of the U.S. public does not know that the U.S. has overseas territories, including Puerto Rico, which is kind of a little bit crazy to me because I guess that those people also don't know that the U.S. Virgin Islands are ours, or Guam, or any of those other overseas territories are ours as well. Matthew, do you know every single U.S. territory off the top of your head?
Well, I know we have a few. I mean, there's a few of them. We have the contiguous 50 states.
That's not a territory.
You
That's
know,
still
we have
just a
that.
states.
That's what I said, contiguous 50 states. I didn't say 50 territories. They have the Virgin Islands. That's one of them down there. You have Puerto Rico. And then we have, zoom in down there to Florida a little bit. Let's see. The Dominican Republic's not one, is it?
No, that's an independent country.
Yeah, I thought it was. I was making sure, though. I'll be honest, I don't really memorize the territories and stuff. Unless it's a state, I kind of just like go with the states.
So the only ones that I really know, folks, off the top of my head would be the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and Guam. Those would basically be the only ones that I know off the top of my head, but I know that we have more. So let's take a look. So these are the following U.S. overseas territories: Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, and American Samoa. So those are all of our U.S. territories. But there's also several smaller, mostly uninhabited islands. But, you know, those are basically a part of another territory. So let's take a look here. Oh, yeah. So, you know, here's some of them. You know, you got Midway, Wake Island, the Marshall Islands, Micronesia, Palau.
Oh, Bikini Atoll.
Oh, yeah. That's where all those, like, women with the bikinis on are at, right? Like, they grow in the wild there or something, right?
Yeah, some say that the bomb. That's what they say. They literally exploded a nuke there.
Let's see. Let's go take a look, folks, at the Northern Mariana Islands, which is just north of Guam. Which, you know, I just realized, folks, that we were actually talking about this a while ago because they're rebuilding the Tinian Air Base on Tinian Island. And I just realized, folks, that I completely forgot that we covered that literally like 2 weeks ago, and that is a U.S. overseas territory. Pretty much in the same area as Guam, though. Guam's right down here, and these are the Northern Mariana Islands. Let's take a look at what it looks like down here. This is a place, by the way, that y'all can travel, folks, overseas without having to have a passport, because it's technically still within the United States. But you'll need a real ID, because there's nothing like a police state. But here is what we've got. This is the Northern Marshall Islands, which is a U.S. territory. I'm not going to lie, y'all. I don't know when the hell it is, but we basically do not maintain a single U.S. overseas territory at all. Like, all of them look pretty rough. And I feel like that is something that is kind of a failing of this country, you know, when you think about it, because none of these people have any voting rights, basically, because they're not an incorporated U.S. state. And because they don't have any voting rights, their places look like this. Pretty damn bad. Like, you know, it's like, I feel like we kind of owe it to these people, considering that they are citizens of the United States, even if they can't vote, to try and at least find a way to make these islands prosper, so that way they can be proud to be U.S. citizens, instead of, you know, like a lot of Puerto Ricans that kind of really don't like the United States because they're a territory of us, but we do nothing to really maintain their island, or try and give them any form of an economy or investments or any chances at all. We basically just leave them alone down there with nothing. Like, you know, it's a
Have
little
you ever
bit.
seen that? Have you ever seen that island, that little St. James Island?
I think that's an unofficial U.S. territory, isn't it? Let's take a little look
Zoom
at
in
it.
on it and let's see where it's at. Little St. James. Let's see. Also, it's a private island, by the way.
Oh,
They
look at.
they bought this one.
Oh,
Oh,
it's
look
in
at
the
that.
U.S.
Where is this?
Virgin Islands. Look at that. It's in the U.S. Virgin
Oh,
Islands.
oh, right there. How much? How much? Let's see how much this thing was. How much? Let's see. How much did Little St. James cost? It cost roughly about $60 million. It was sold in May 2023 for $60 million. Let's see here. I didn't say how much it was. Oh, it was bought in 1998 by the devil for $8 million. It seems like it appreciated quite a bit in value, actually. It became very valuable. The unfortunate part is if you further buy the island, you're essentially buying something that the devil resided on. So I'm not sure if you'd want that.
Yeah, I'd have to say, it's something else. Um, I have to say, it's something a little interesting here, the crimes that were conducted down here and the people who came here too, they're saying that, they're saying folks that those Congress people who were able to look at the unredacted files, they're saying that there was a lot of names in there that were pretty shocking. And I got to be honest with y'all, after watching a lot of them come out of there, a lot of them looked to be absolutely terrified at who they saw was actually on that. Did you notice that? Like, everyone seemed to be dazed and kind of in a shock. Did you see that, Matthew?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I saw that one guy, he had normal eyes, and then his eyes became very bulgy after he saw the list.
Well, we don't talk about him. We're talking about the Congress members who went in there today. The
Oh,
ones who came out of the skiff. I mean, that guy, he's seen him a long time ago. He's gone. But the other people though that just saw it today, the ones that aren't, a part of the executive, the ones that are a part of the Congress, they looked pretty terrified at what they finally found out.
yeah, they probably realized there's probably no way in hell they're ever going to be able to say those names without getting in some serious retribution coming their way or something. That's probably what they realized.
Yeah, I'd have to say probably. But let's see. I say, let's see here. I saw someone say, oh, someone saying, what about this island? Oh, it's nothing really about this island. It's just it's basically the center of one of the largest, not like a conspiracy theory, but one of the largest conspiracies and cover-ups that's probably ever been seen in the modern day. I mean, this beats Watergate by a factor of 20 at least. I mean, Watergate looks like nothing compared to this. And it's just it's really insane, it's just that's all I can really say. Getting into it any further, some people just cannot discuss things reasonably. So I'll just leave it at it's insane. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, it's time for us to move on and into the next one. Also, by the way, we're going to have to keep a little bit close with time here because I've got to get up very early in the morning and go tend to something. So with that, we're on to the next one.
Oh, okay. Well, our next one here goes to Segoy the Sauce, who puts in another $50 support. And thank you very much, Segoy. And we do appreciate that very, very much. It's very generous of you. The second one. He said it all started with 9-11 and the endless wars. It was a slow downward slide since then. Endless wars, market crashes, the great lockdown, and nothing is what it used to be. And 2019 ain't coming back. Unfortunately, I don't think it is coming back. I'm not trying to sound defeatist, but I feel like we're moving beyond that time, which is kind of unfortunate because I kind of liked that prior time when I was growing up. I kind of liked the way the country was operating, but it seems to be operating a little bit differently now. I will say, when it comes to the crackdown on civil liberties in the United States, I would definitively say that the Patriot Act was the start of the loss of rights for Americans. That was definitely the start of it. And it's been butchered ever since then. And the crazy part is they don't even have to pass new legislation. All they have to do is reinterpret the law, and they expand their powers that way, which requires no legislation being passed by the by Congress. It doesn't require that at all. So it's just basically uncontrolled escalation, and nobody's really keeping a check on it. But Enforcer, what say you?
Yeah, I definitely have to agree, and I got to thank you massively for the support, Sligo the Sauce. And I do have to generally agree with you. That's generally where things started to go awry. And sadly, we were born after that had started to happen, so we never really got to witness what America was like beforehand. But I'm still proud of the country, and I think that we can generally pull it out of the gutter because I'm not a doomer, everyone. That would be ridiculous to be a doomer because it's basically living with no purpose at that point. There's always a way to fix everything. It's just that it takes a lot of work and effort and people believing that they can actually do it, which is probably the hardest part these days because the government likes to beat people down into thinking that they can't do anything about anything when they can. And it's just a matter of doing it. I won't get into it further than that though. But a big thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Hoodoo, Texas, who puts in a $20 support. And thank you very much, Hoodoo, for that support. He said 99 balloons, red balloons, floating into summer. Panic. It's red alert. There's something here from somewhere else. The war machine springs to life, opens up eager eye, focusing on it in the sky. Is this a song or something? Like, I'm not sure. Like, I feel like this is a song.
I feel like that is a song. I just don't know what type it is. But I do thank you for the support and sharing that with us. And a big thanks to you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're about to move on to the next one. And Alan in Hines just said, only found out recently America doesn't have an official national language. Yeah, that's always been the case. Like, you can go down to the DMV, you can ask for a driver's license test in just about every language on the planet. Like, here, when I had to get my driver's license here in Utah, when I went down to the DMV, they had the driver's license test available, ready. I mean, like, the tests were literally ready and available at that point in English, Mandarin, Italian, French, German, Russian, Mandarin, I believe Japanese and Korean as well. And then you could also, if you spoke any other language than that, you could request for them to literally go out of their way to make the test in your language, because technically the U.S. does not have an official language. English is basically our unofficial recognized language, but there technically isn't a legal language. That's why you can also see that in a lot of government services, they'll usually have whatever the text is on a document in several languages, whatever is the most common. Like, for example, the state of Wisconsin writes up all of their legal paperwork in English, Spanish, and interesting enough, Tagalog, which is a native Filipino language, because there's a significant population of people in Wisconsin that speak Tagalog. And you can see that in a lot of different states, because there is no official language within the United States. But interesting enough, though, while there is no official language, a citizenship test does require you to show a proficiency in English. But once you are a citizen of the United States, you could speak whatever your native language was for the rest of your life, and you would never have to speak English again, even for government paperwork, documentation, tests, exams, and so on. So I hope that does address that the best I can, and a big thanks to you once again for bringing that up, because it is actually an interesting point. But yeah, the U.S. does not have an official language, interestingly enough. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Robert Betancourt. And thank you very much, Robert, for that $20 support. And we do appreciate that very, very much. And that's very generous of you. And Robert said, attack helicopters firing on cartel across border in Mexico. Is this a new front?
We don't know yet. We're still trying to see. It might be, but we'll have to sadly wait to get you an answer on that one. But a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Chris Feilbach. And thank you very much, Chris, for that $20 support. And we do appreciate that. He said a flop is a floating point operation per second. And also, I did get that incorrect, by the way, I will admit. Chris said it's a measure of computation and not storage. And you mean bytes. But exa is probably still too small a measure for data center storage. You are correct, by the way. I misspoke earlier. I meant to say exabytes, not exaflops. Flops, like you mentioned, is a way they measure computing power, not storage. So I was incorrect. You good catch. But also, I think it is exabytes that they're measuring it in that facility that I was talking about, the Utah data center. I think it is measured in that. But maybe it sounds like you're probably more knowledgeable in the subject than me. In fact, you may be a computer scientist by the sounds of it. So possibly. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say, generally, that's fairly interesting. I actually don't know a lot about computer storage beyond terabytes. Terabytes is the biggest amount of storage I've ever had to deal with. Anything beyond that's beyond my comprehension. But that's very interesting to hear, and I thank you for sharing that and correcting that statement from earlier. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And also, I just saw Alan ask, could this government announce an official language? It would require an act of Congress, but generally, it wouldn't be popular, just to be completely honest, because at that point, it's getting into a very questionable sort of a grounds when you talk about historics behind it. Like, for example, the U.S. heavily tried to erase Native American cultures from the late 1800s into the early 1900s, to the point that Native American children will be stripped from their families and sent to a boarding school and basically forced to just be a normal, like, say, like a white American or something like that. They would learn English only. They would not learn their native language, so on and so forth. And when you get into that kind of stuff, you're starting to trample on people's rights. Like, if someone wants, if you were born in America and you spoke English, who in the world is the government to tell you that you can't just, learn, say, Russian one day and speak Russian for the rest of your life? Who in the world is the government to tell you that you can or can't do that? And also, I saw someone say, well, the test should be given in the language that the signs are in. But if you look at American road signs, which I'll show you all right here, let me see if I can show you all some of these right here. If you look at most American road signs, very rarely is there actually any English on them, unless you're talking about interstate road signs to tell you where a town is. But then again, that doesn't require you to have an incredibly in-depth understanding, say, of English. You just have to kind of know what the town looks like, at least in English, in a very rudimentary form, and then you can get there. Most signs in America, most road signs around the world actually, are made for people to be able to easily understand them without understanding a uniform language. So I would honestly say I'm not really a fan of the United States having an official language, because while I speak English and I don't really speak any other language, I really don't know why in the world there's this significant push for people to speak English. And also on top of that, it's like, what about the Native Americans that live on the reservations that may or may not speak English? Are they now forced to speak English? Like, that seems kind of like an abridgment of their culture and their rights. And what about the Spanish populations the Spanish enclaves in America that have been here before the United States took that land under their control, like in Colorado? There are huge populations in Colorado of Spanish-speaking Mexican descendants that lived in Colorado well before the U.S. even took the land. It's like, that's something that I don't really know about, because it's like, are we going to start telling, or like, also on top of that, are we going to start telling the Cajuns down in Louisiana that have been around longer than the United States that they can't speak Creole anymore, they have to speak English and that's it? Or the Amish, we're going to tell them that they can't speak Dutch?
They're not saying that they can't speak anything else. They're just saying that, English is the language that the documents and the signs and everything, which is honestly that way already, like pretty much.
Well, I mean, not really. I mean, if you look at those road signs, where is English on most of any of these signs?
I mean, you don't really need English to get this stuff across. If you see a cow on the signs, it's expected that people will understand that the cow might be in the road.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, road signs in America don't have a lot of written instructions on them. It'll just be like, Tacoma, 120 miles, and you don't have to know the full English language to know that that's the city of Tacoma and it's 120 miles away.
Yeah, I mean, usually when I see signs on the road, like they're telling you how far away a city is, it's usually, in English, like most of the signs are, like telling you about where to go, how to get off of this street and stuff like that. I don't see it in Spanish.
Well, I mean, El Paso is a Spanish name, and so is Los Angeles, and so is, let me see here, Las Cruces. Those are technically Spanish named cities. What about St. Augustine in Florida? That's a Spanish name.
Those are proper names. Those are proper names. So I mean, it stays that way no matter what you're putting it in, typically speaking. But I mean, if you say, like, for example, like Albuquerque, up ahead 90 miles or something like that, they're not going to put it like, Albuquerque and then Spanish behind it and then say 90 miles ahead or whatever that would be in Spanish. It's always in English.
Well, yeah, but I mean, at the same time, though, it's like, it doesn't require you to know English all that well. Like, if we went to Mexico, you don't have to know Mexican verbatim to know where in the world a city like, say, Camargo is. Like, you don't have to, like,
They put both. They put both on the sign, I think, English and Spanish.
Let me go see Mexican road signs.
China does the same thing too, by the way.
No, actually, they put it in Spanish. Also, why in the world, like, well, Canada does that
No,
because
man, not that clip art stop sign. Like, pull up a picture of a Mexican road sign, like it says, like those green overhead signs that say like how far ahead cities are. It should be in Spanish and English.
That doesn't look like that to me.
But that's proper names though. Like, that's the names of the town. But like, what I'm talking about. Like, yeah, like this, like right here. Is it in English and Spanish?
Well, that one is just in Spanish.
Let's see here. Hold on a second. Let's see here.
This is just in Spanish only.
It says here in Mexico, traffic and public signs are primarily in Spanish, though bilingual signage is common in most major cities, hotels, and near the U.S. border.
So generally, save for some exceptions, it's mostly in Spanish.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think anywhere in the United States, I'm not aware of anywhere in the United States where they put it in bilingual translations.
Let's see, bilingual road signs in the USA. Let's see. Bilingual road signs exist across the U.S., particularly in border regions, ethnic neighborhoods, and tribal lands. So they do exist, much like in Mexico, along the border area. So let's test that, and let's go down to El Paso and see what the road signs look like around here. Let's take a look. So there's a road sign back there. Let's see here. There's one over. Let's go up to this one.
It's kind of looks like the interstate in Salt Lake City a little bit.
Yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it? I mean, like that's like it's like concrete and everything. There's another one back here. That one was in raw English. This one's also in raw English. So it looks like the interstate doesn't follow that. I guess it's like the local roads, like the state highways and stuff, maybe.
I mean, like hot take is this. If I'm in Mexico, I'm not going to expect their signs to be in English. Just hot take. It's if the language that they primarily speak is Spanish, I'm not going to go down there and demand that they put the signs in Spanish and English. If you're in America and the predominant language is English, it seems a bit unreasonable to ask that the signs are in Spanish, English, perhaps Mandarin. It's like, where do you draw the line? At what point? It's like it's nice that they do that if they choose to do it, but it shouldn't be a requirement.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not a requirement, though, here in the United States. It's just kind of done in border regions where there's significant Spanish-speaking populations and heavy amounts of traffic that speak Spanish only. But, you don't have to know English to pass a driver's license test in America because the road signs are designed to be able to be understood whatever language you speak, like at all. Like, you can generally understand any road sign in America. Like, if I go back to them again, let's see, U.S. road signs. Let me go type that back in again. Like, they literally were designed by a uniform board to be a standard that you could tell basically what it is, like a railroad crossing, a traffic light, slippery when wet. Like, it was made with basically no English on it, so that way anyone from anywhere around the world could come here and generally understand what the road sign would mean.
I don't know what some of these mean, and I live here.
Well, I mean, that's tough for you. Like, that's tough for you. You're supposed to know that,
Well,
man.
let's see here. I actually know most of them, to be honest, but let's see here. There's a few that I don't. You see, actually, I take it back. I should actually know every single one of these here. Some of them look foreign, just glancing at them, but actually, I do know them all.
Yeah, and also, like, other signs, like, say, the yield sign, there's English on it, but notice that it's an upside-down triangle with a red outer field and a white interior triangle. Even if you don't know English, you will be able to recognize the yield sign, even if it doesn't have the word yield on it. And every single road sign is designed with that sort of a principle in mind, that you never have to read anything, you just look at the sign and you generally know the symbols and what it means. And that's all you have to know, generally, to pass a driver's test in the United States, and also the technicality of how to drive a car, how to signal, and all that sort of stuff as well. But then again, outside of actually getting through that test, you don't have to have any proficiency in English to be able to have to pass a driver's test. You could speak Russian, you could speak Creole, which is basically a native French dialect of the United States. You could speak any Native American language. You could speak anything. And then pass the test and drive on national roads. And I don't really know why that should be a requirement that everyone has to speak English. Because it's never been a requirement historically. I mean, like, and I think.
How are you supposed to function? How are you supposed to function in the United States if you don't speak English? Like, that's going to be very difficult because most of the people that live here speak English. Like, it's just understood. It may not be the designated national language of America, but it's unofficially the national language because most people here, the vast majority, speak English. So, I mean, if you go to, like, for example, China, as like an American that speaks English, it would be nice if you run across people that speak English, but to expect it or expect that they're supposed to like bend to that seems a little bit unreasonable.
Well, you don't have to expect them to bend to it. It's just that you can, speak whatever language you want and come to the United States. Like, for example, if you go and become, say, a citizen of another country that has a very specific ethnic background, like France, they're going to require you to know French because it's the national language of their country because they are the French people. The people of the United States of America are really, in particular, no specific people. I mean, they come from basically every country in the world. There's no major demographical group. I mean, there's the British descent, there's the Anglo descendants, the Germans, the Italians, the Irish, the Spanish, the Latin American people, the African American people. I mean, there's every single group imaginable with every single different background, every single different culture. So there's basically no root culture, like to the United States. It's just basically a melting pot of everyone. So it wouldn't really make sense to say, okay, it's a melting pot of everyone, and we have no base culture, and there is no base group of people that make up the majority of the United States that really are ethnically from the United States and from the land historically for thousands of years, but we're now going to mandate English to be the official language. And that was kind of the premise back then.
But imagine though, like, for example, like if if a whole bunch of people move here that speak Spanish, which there's nothing wrong with Spanish, by the way, there's nothing wrong with the language. It's just a compatibility issue. If you move into like the United States, and let's say I don't know the official numbers, but let's say like 85% of the people in the United States speak English and no other language, and then you have like 20% of people moving in that only speak Spanish. That's going to cause a major issue because there's a huge language barrier. You have a huge portion of the country at that point that cannot properly communicate with the other percentage that's in the country. So that hampers a lot of things. Like, for example, having careers or jobs, you're going to have an extremely difficult time. It's going to reduce efficiency because you can't communicate normally with that barrier. So, I mean, melting pot implies that people bring their cultures here and they assimilate into it, and that goes for language. That doesn't mean you have to eliminate your culture, but it means you have to assimilate into it, which means there are commonalities that we must share in order to function properly.
I mean, like I would agree, but I mean, at the same time, when the 13 colonies formed the United States, a large majority of the Pennsylvanians spoke German. Those people are the Amish today, and they were the Amish back then, and they still spoke German. And then a lot of people in, say, New York City, because New York City, up until just a couple of decades before the Revolution, was actually a Dutch colony called New Amsterdam. A lot of people who lived in New York spoke Dutch. So, it's like, it's kind of hard to say like everybody in the 13 colonies spoke English when the country was founded, because in reality they were speaking three different languages. They were speaking English, they were speaking German, and they were also speaking Dutch. So it's like it's really hard to say that even then, because it's like eventually they kind of got, I guess you could say, Anglicanized, and most of them learned English. Like, for example, most people in New York, you're not going to see a lot of people speaking Dutch in New York City anymore, but that's also because of the massive influx of Irish and Italian immigrants that came there later. But you'll still find people in Pennsylvania, the Amish, who speak German almost as one of their only languages.
Yeah, I mean, maybe so, but I mean, if they can somehow make that work, that's great. But I mean, the Amish aren't running around like, for example, I think most of the Amish actually speak English though. Like they may speak the secondary language you're referring to, but that doesn't mean they can't speak English.
Well, yeah, but I mean, why in the world should they ever be forced to speak English? I mean, they're voting
Um,
citizens of the United States. Why in the world should they be forced to learn English to take a driver's license test? If, say, one day, being Amish, they wanted to take a driver's license test, although they probably wouldn't.
Well, I mean, when they get pulled over by a police officer because they violate the traffic rules or something, the police officer can't even properly conduct their duty because they can't even speak or communicate with them at that point. So, I mean, at that point, it's a huge drag on everything because our system is set up for English. I mean, to me, I'm just not a huge fan of that. Like being perfectly honest, like I believe of being very respectful. Like for example, if I wanted to move to, let's say, France or something, I would not go to France, only speak English, and then go around inconveniencing the hell out of everybody inside of France because I can't speak French. I would know, okay, when I go places, I'm going to probably piss people off because I can't speak French, and I'm expecting people to bend around me. When I'm coming to their country, I should be assimilating into their environment, learning French, and properly doing it that way. Or otherwise, then, you should maybe rethink going to France because it's going to be a huge problem when
Well,
it comes to being
I,
able to communicate.
I think everyone's misunderstanding what I'm saying here, because I'm seeing you saying this and the chat saying this. I'm not saying you have to learn Spanish, but the government has to be able to bend to whatever a citizen requires. Like if a U.S. citizen speaks Spanish only, or if they speak English only, they should be provided a test in whatever language they speak. I don't know why in the world the citizens are having to be forced to conform to the government's demands. That seems to be a little bit topsy turvy. Like why the hell should an Amish citizen who was living on the land of Pennsylvania well before the U.S. was ever a founded country, why the hell should they be forced by government requirement to learn English to go take a driver's test if they want to take one, or a horse and buggy test if they're going to take that either? Or why in the world should the Cajuns speaking Creole be forced to speak English to go take a driver's test? They're a citizen of the United States. If they speak Creole as their primary French dialect, they should be able to have a test provided to them in Creole.
I mean, technically, according to the letter of the law, I believe you're correct. But I mean, in reality, though, I mean, while you may have a right to do something like that, I'm not sure if that's the best practice, in my personal opinion. Like, I know that may be a hot take to some people. They're like, well, you don't want to. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be able to speak Creole, by the way. I'm just simply saying that, for example, they shouldn't go and expect the entire system to bend around their individual preference or their individual language because they're unwilling to learn English. That seems to be a bit of an undue burden on the taxpayer.
Well, I mean, it's been an undue burden ever since the founding of this country, though.
Yeah, I mean, how many languages do we do that to, though? Like, for example, how much does it cost to translate the entire driver's book into their language? I mean, that's a big cost, and then you have to do that for potentially hundreds of languages if you have hundreds of different nationalities doing the driving test. I mean, that's unreasonable.
Well, right now the United States provides proficiency tests in over 120 languages. So like a burden to the taxpayer. How? I mean, the tests have already been generally put together. I mean, what about all those Irish and Italian immigrants that came over from Italy and Ireland that didn't know a lick of English? And they still got in and they still conducted citizenship tests and they were able to become Americans, hardly understanding anything of English. And now people look at those groups as upstanding groups of America, key cultural groups. They were never forced to undergo that requirement. Why in the world should people living in the United States, no matter what language they speak, be forced by the government when dealing with the government to conform to what the government requires? Especially as far as their person is concerned. It's like that would like for people who are saying, "Oh man, that's stupid." I mean, what you're saying that we have to learn Spanish? No, but that's what you're saying to other people. You're saying that all of the Amish people up in Pennsylvania, they've got to stop speaking German if that's their only language. They have to speak English. All the Cajuns down in Louisiana have to speak English, and then anyone else in the country has to speak English. Like that's basically the same thing as them doing the reverse and saying all of us have to learn Spanish and then take the test in Spanish. Like that seems to me to be a little bit un-American to me, because I don't really think the government should be putting a requirement on as a person you have to meet this specific requirement for a government test. Because what are they going to do next? Are they going to say you have to be 6 foot as well, or you're not tall enough by our requirements?
But it could simply install a Neuralink and preload it with the necessary English language module. That could solve the problem easily without any undue burden.
Yeah, I would say, that's possible. And they could get
I'm joking. I'm joking.
They
By the
could
way.
pay for Neuralink Prime and skip the ads. Like they could do that as well. But I see some people saying it's about being flexible. I see some people saying English is more proficient and it's more descriptive. Well, yeah, that's a personal opinion, and I don't think the government should be forcing down anyone. Like, if you speak English and you don't want to learn another language, and some guy comes up to you speaking Spanish, that's tough on him. You're not required to learn Spanish. But as far as the government is concerned, if you come up there and you're speaking Tagalog or English or German or Creole, I mean, they should have a test or some sort of proficiency test in your language. Why in the world is the government I feel like that's going against the kind of liberty-minded ideals that the U.S. was founded on, is that the government's now going to tell you what language you have to speak for them to have the honor of giving you a test for you to exercise privileges or rights that you're owed under the law.
Do you know the government has its own language? Did you know that?
No, I know it's called political speak, isn't it? Like
Oh well, no. There's actually two separate subsects of a language in the government. For politicians, it's called bullshitocracy. For bureaucracy, it's bureaucratic speak. That's how the government speaks.
Oh man, honestly, man, that's truth. And also I see a lot of people. I don't know what it is, folks, with this whole thing about English has got to be the official language. Is for 250 years now, the U.S. has never had an official language. Why the hell is everyone acting like this is destroying the country now? When in the world did that happen? I mean, it hasn't happened over the past 250 years, but now this year, out of the whole 250 the country's existed, now not having an official language is going to destroy the country. If it was going to destroy the country, and y'all believe in the Founding Fathers and all that, why the hell did the Founding Fathers not make an official language for the United States of America? And how in the world did the country survive those early years if that would truly destroy the country when it's in its most fragile, most infantile state? Why didn't it destroy it then? Like, why? Like, some of these issues, folks, I feel like people just come up with stuff to bitch about because there's never been a requirement to know any language. And if you know anything about U.S. history, when most Western settlers went west, a lot of them were usually duolingual or trilingual, and they were usually able to speak English, Spanish, and maybe even some native languages. And if you listen to any recounts of their stories as they traveled across the country, they usually would have to whip out Spanish or some native language or English or whatever to be able to communicate with people. There were a lot of wild Western towns where most people couldn't even speak to each other. Some people spoke Swedish, some of them German, some of them Irish, some of them English. there was no requirement or forcing on anyone back then to go, oh, you have to speak English, you Swedish bastard. You can't speak Swedish around here. I mean, they just did what they did, and they found a way to get by. But I mean, it's crazy to me that that's been the fact of life for 250 years in this country. It's basically just an understood norm that you can speak whatever language you want and get a proficiency test in it. But nowadays, for some reason, now that's a problem, like it ever was one. But anyways, with that, we are like, it's kind of like the thing with the Second Amendment, where everyone makes that into an issue these days. Like that hasn't been around for 250 years as well, or freedom of speech and everything else. It's like, the country's gotten by for 250 years with these understood laws and rights. What the hell's the problem with them now today? We've gotten 250 years by with them. What's wrong with it now? But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Sadato Hosoda. Thank you very much, Sadato, for that $10 support. He said, Domo arigato.
Oh, thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. And thank you for the kind words as well. In Japanese, I believe that is. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a $10 support from Mark Dixon. And thank you very much, Mark, as well, for that $10 support. He did not leave a comment, but we do appreciate that very, very much. And we also have a 10 from Crazy Eggman. He said, is this weekend the start of attacks on Iran? And what will the top objectives be?
I would say it's highly unlikely, in my opinion, attacks are going to be this weekend. I have a feeling it might even be months from now, in my opinion. But a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to BLK Tornado, who puts in a 10. They said, Russia has been its own undoing for 1,000 years, so I guess it shouldn't be that surprising, but it's still insane.
Yeah, it is. It really is crazy to watch that happen in real time. But a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Craig from Craigslist. He put in a 10, but he went berserk earlier. He said, did you hear about that illegal biolab being run in Vegas that was discovered?
No, I didn't. So with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 10 from Jeremy the Hill, who said, if things keep going how they are, how long do you think Russia will last before something happens to take them out of the war?
I would say the Russians might be able to last about another year, maybe a year and a half, but they're not going to be able to last much longer than that. We've generally been going with that for a minute now, and I think that that's still going to be the case. But with that, I hope that does address to the best I can, and a big thanks to you once again for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Kachulian343, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Kachulian, as well, for supporting the channel. He said, if you want them to stop the drug problem here, number 1, tighten up the border. Number 2, address the massive mental health crisis that we have. Number 3, raise the standard of living. Every addict I've met was in trauma or poverty. I think that is generally true. Like, I think the unfortunate part that people don't want to recognize is people that tend to delve into, like, for example, narcotics addiction. They generally had an underlying mental health situation that they were probably struggling with to begin with, and the narcotics provided a good outlet to escape from it. So that's my theory. I think I would agree with you on that. And also, I think if those problems were addressed, I think the standard of living would rise automatically as long as the economy gives everybody a fair shot, as long as those mental health issues were addressed. But that's usually the root cause of the problem. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that, in my honest opinion, can you reread that again?
Yeah. He said, if you want to stop the drug problem, tighten up the border, address the mental health crisis, and raise the standard of living.
Oh, okay, sorry. It's just that it's hard to remember those questions for a long time. But beyond that, though, I would generally agree with you. I would say that those things would definitely be helpful in getting people off of drugs. And that's generally what we've been saying on the channel would be a fairly good idea. And so with that, a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel keep it running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Engineer MD, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Engineer, for that support. He said, I debated whether to post this, but there's a highly secure open source radio-based mesh network called Meshtastic. These devices can be had for as little as $25, and the good ones are about $70 with AES 128. Which I believe is encryption. I've heard of those radios, by the way. I've heard of those mesh radios. Those are making the rounds, like they're advertising those. I'm not sure if that specific company is the one I've seen being advertised, but those are interesting. I tried doing a brief look into how they work, but I didn't have enough time to really study it in depth. But it appears to be fascinating that they just sort of work by bouncing, apparently, the radio signals off of each other's devices, which is kind of fascinating. But Enforcer, what say you?
That is pretty interesting. And me personally, I don't know a lot about the technological side of things like that, but that is still interesting nonetheless. But a big thanks to you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 10 from Serpico, who said this backward medieval style. Let's see here. Hold on a second. Oh, yeah, okay. He said this backward medieval style government was parading coffins of CENTCOM commanders around the city today, meaning the Iranians were. And you can find photos if you search. And I hope the country moves past this soon. We need help.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the Iranian government is a wicked one, and I think that we need to take care of that once and for all here since we have the chance to. It would be a mistake not to. But a huge thanks to you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 6 from Boycott China, who said, out in West Texas town of El Paso, I fell in love with Mexican gal. Let's see, wait a minute, hold on. Oh, okay, this one's good. I got worried for a minute. They said nighttime would find me at
Rose's Cantina. Blah 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 blah
Oh.
blah 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 blah. It's a cowboy song.
Oh, interesting. I haven't
Yeah.
heard that.
I think it was sung by Marty Robbins, the one I remember, but it's a pretty good song, actually. It's a pretty good one. But a big thanks to you for the support, and that's the song I was talking about right there, actually. Good on you that you knew that. And also, folks, it's time for us to play a game. Truth or Consequences? This is the town of Truth or Consequences, and here you can find a lot of truth and maybe even consequences. But anyways, with that, we are on.
That yard is nice. I like the way they did that grass.
Man, that lawn down there in Truth and Consequence, Truth or Consequence. I mean, damn. I mean, look at that. Holy moly.
That yard right there is rolled out like carpet.
Man, I tell you. Oh, look at that. Man, a nice old adobe building. I like those. Like the old Santa Fe, you know. That is a little overgrown, but nice nonetheless. Anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from Octavian Timorsanu, and he said Moscow Times is a Dutch paper. It's not Russian propaganda. It's quite the opposite, as far as I know.
You know, I actually had to pull that up in the middle of the show, and you're right, actually, and I'll have to correct that right here and make an official retraction. That was incorrect information that I provided earlier. But a big thanks to you for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Ballistics Computer, who puts in a 5. And they said, given the recent news about the Chinese biofacilities, might be getting conspiratorial here, but imagine, if you will, that if they tried to do something with that here in the United States. Now, I saw that story, by the way. I saw that story about the lab getting busted out there. I couldn't tell what the objective behind it was. I couldn't tell if they were trying to manufacture something bad or something, or if they were simply trying to create pharmaceuticals. I think the second option about pharmaceuticals might be a little naive, because I'm like, who sets up a lab like that in their house? Seems a little bit strange. So I don't really know about that right there. It's certainly a little bit concerning, to say the least. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta say, a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I'd have to say, it's concerning, but everyone's running biolabs. We have our own, and I'm sure that we're coming up with some interesting recipes in them as well. So generally, there's always a counter to that sort of stuff. Generally, but a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from Red Russell, who said, how far along are the lasers that can shoot down drones?
Well, they're pretty far along now. We understand that there's at least some deployable versions in the prototyping phase, so they're getting very close to fielding production-style units that'll be produced en masse. So thank you for the support. I hope that this addressed that well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Red Russell once again, who puts in the 5. He said, as I am new, how old are you guys, and how old's the audience? And I am 25 years of age, 25 years young, 25 years old, 25 years stagnant. Also, how old's the audience? The audience is, I think these days, is more largely distributed across the age brackets, but it generally skews more toward mid to older, generally speaking, for the audience. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I'm actually 23 years old, soon to be 24 here in about 4 days. So it's a Sunday. I'll be turning 24 on this Sunday night fundraiser coming up. And so that's how old I am. And the audience is generally what Matthew said. It's usually about 40 and up. That's like our large majority of the audience there. So I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you for the support, and welcome to being new here. I hope you enjoyed here. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Pringles Slayer, who puts in a 5. They said, if we really send Venezuelan oil to Israel, will that raise tensions with Russia?
Not really. Like, there actually isn't a lot of Venezuelan oil to go around. They only make about a million, I think it's 1.1 million barrels of oil a day right now, which is equivalent to basically nothing. I mean, there's a lot of countries out there that make far more than that. Like, for example, Qatar makes about 3 times that amount, and they're about the size of a human thumb. So, like, generally, I would say that there isn't really a lot of Venezuelan oil to be shifting around, actually, to be completely honest. So, I don't really think we'd be giving Israel Venezuelan oil. I think we'd probably find them some locally sourced oil from probably the Gulf states. But a big thanks to you for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Andrew Honeycutt, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Andrew, for that support. He said, Authoritarian 101 is creating a division between people who would ordinarily get along and have the same interests, and who benefits from that, and LSA.
And, well, that's a good question. That's a good question right there. And I'd say that really nobody stands to benefit of that, at least in the common people, the citizenry of the Republic. We don't really stand to benefit from that a lot. But there are some people up there at the top that do. So I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. I hope that does address that well. And we're on to the next one.
And up next, a big shout out to Razor UK for putting in a $2 support, and we do appreciate that very, very much. We also have a 2 from Plazath, and also a $1 support from PIF. And we appreciate all 3 of you, Razor, Plazath, and PIF, for that support and helping to keep the channel running, and we do appreciate you. But Enforcer, what say you?
And we gotta appreciate all of y'all greatly. We thank you for the support, because if it wasn't for y'all, we wouldn't be able to make the show a reality. So a huge thanks to y'all so much once again. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And with that, folks, it is now time to jump out of our super chats, because that was our last super chat for the night, by the way. And a huge shout out to all of our super chatters for helping to keep the channel running with that viewer support, because we do not run ads on these streams right here. We said no ads. Get those ads off the screen. We don't want those nasty ads. We don't want them in here. Those nasty ads. They said, sir, why don't you share some ads, sir? And I said, we don't want it clogging up the airways. We don't want that doing that. It's a nasty thing when it clogs up the airways. It's like arterial blockage. You don't want that. But anyways, jumping into our Morse code coders of the night, we have Paul Schultz, Kevin, Mason, Joni, Norm, Arabelle, Her Royal Fluffiness, Kush, Cobra, Tarek, Sire, and Brian. And they said, the Morse says, the Russian army is collapsing. And the Russian economy too. Very nice, LLT, LSA.
And ding, 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 ding. And that's the sound of money. Y'all got that down on the nail. That is the Morse code message of the night. I gotta congratulate y'all greatly for getting that correct time and time again, because Lee Springer Corps never disappoints in getting that Morse code message correct. So with that, I hope that does address that well. It's about time for us to move on to the live chats, but someone just said, the enforcer does not know that you have to know English to become a U.S. citizen. I think you don't know how to hear, because I said that earlier. I said that like at the start when I was talking about the whole language thing, like Wisconsin has, the official language, well, basically legal text in English, Spanish, and Tagalog, but interestingly enough, you have to speak English to pass the citizenship test. So I don't think I don't know that. I think you don't know how to hear. Maybe you need to rewind it and listen.
Wow. We have a little bit of a cat fight here.
Hey,
it seems saying, like we're getting a little bit edgy, a little bit testy.
I'm just saying, because I've been watching that same person say that for like 30 minutes now. Literally right after I got done saying that, they said that, and I've been watching it for 30 minutes. I'm like, are they just like, what's going on with this? It's like, can you not listen? I mean, like, I'm not trying to be rude there, but I kind of get a little annoyed. I care.
100,000 people a night. It's
I care.
100,000 plus a night, and it's one person saying a little statement. It's just a little something.
Well, I care sometimes, because, I feel like after the 7th time asking that, you kind of rewind it and listen or something. But anyways, with that, we're on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to none other than Lunar Castle, who said, are you worried about desperate measures from Russia in response from their lines failing?
I would say it's not going to be too bad for the Russians right now. I mean, the Ukrainians will make some pretty significant gains, but significant gains these days is like probably 12 villages. So I don't think it would cause a humongous crisis for the Russians, but it's probably going to freak them out a good bit in the Russian army, that's for sure. And it might also turn some more Russians' soldiers' morale a little bit lower down. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the second to last question. Actually, we have one more super chat to cover here, and then we'll be on to the second to last question of the night.
And this super chat goes to Jeremy Vahill, who puts in a 5. He said, is it accurate to say that August von Mackensen was the only undefeated German general in World War I?
I mean, Actually, to be entirely honest with you, I don't really know exactly a great deal about von Mackensen. I'll be entirely honest with you. Most of the First World War, like I know the general broad strokes of the First World War and some of the deeper details on some specific stuff. But what I know the most about is the U.S. American Expeditionary Force in the First World War. So unfortunately, I think that would be out of my wheelhouse to give a clear answer to at the moment. But a big thanks to you for the support, helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on the second to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to Leo, who said, have you heard of UVB-76, and what do you believe it's for? And I believe that's the Mockingbird, isn't it? Like that Russian repeater? Is that what that he's referring to?
Oh, yeah, it's the listening post or the listening station.
Yeah, I think it's a transmitter and a listening station. Isn't that the one that's near like the Chernobyl site?
I don't know.
Or am I getting confused? Let's see here. UVB-76. That's the buzzer. Okay, that's the buzzer. So I'm getting confused here. The Mockingbird's different. That's the thing right here that people tune into on the shortwave on 4625 KHZ, kilohertz, I think it is. But it sends out the buzzing tone. And occasionally the Russians will switch it up and they'll play like Swan Lake or something on it. But it's a number station is what that is. And the speculation has always been that it's sending out coded messages to sleeper agents and spies around the world. That's the idea behind it. But nobody really knows for certain, at least in the public. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would generally have to say I think that covered it quite well indeed. And so with that, we're on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person to put in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is going to be none other than Catalyst Destiny, who said the question is, how much advantage could Ukraine take with this communication situation to strike back or take back land while Russia is in disarray?
In reality, they could actually take a pretty decent advantage because with most Russian units being completely uncoordinated and not really having any fast form of communication with each other right now, you could easily take advantage of that across the entirety of the front and probably push them back a couple of miles if you wanted to, in the best case scenario, due to their complete lack of communication abilities. So I'd actually have to say this is a pretty big blunder for the Russian army. If the Ukrainians worked fast right now, they might be able to gain back a decent amount of territory and a large amount of fronts. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, folks, it's time for us to round out the stream for the night. I got to thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure, as usual. We had 17.2 thousand people here at the peak, and 120,000 people have watched this stream before it ended. I thank you all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world. And if there is a short war video to make tomorrow, Enforcer Matt will actually be the one making that video because I actually have to tend to important business tomorrow, and sadly I won't be around to make the video. So with that, we will see you all tomorrow, either for the short war video or the stream. And so with that, good night, good luck, stay safe, take care. Slava Ukraini, Haram Slava, long live the Lead Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern on the next Nightly War News stream, and we hope to see you all then. And of course, if there is enough news to make tomorrow midday, I will be putting out a short war video in the Enforcer's absence tomorrow, so be sure to tune in for that. And in the meantime, thank you all to 120,000 plus people for joining us by the very end of the stream, and we appreciate every single one of you for choosing us as your news source once again tonight. And we will see you all tomorrow. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.